going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.
What I saw was a metallic object that appeared to be about 30 feet in diameter and was probably about 15 feet tall at its highest point, disc-shaped. No sound to the object at all, although we did have considerable amount of electromagnetic interference on our car systems. The ignitions would not work. Both the radios in the Border Patrol car, the Federal radio,
Now it's yours, and rather.
I blame StreamYards, but we should have had driving.
I blame your internet.
Great conversation and some music here. I don't think we're going to get the music right now, but welcome again to the Unidentified Celebrity Review. It's going to be an interesting show today. I think this will probably be our only technical difficulty if things go well. And the discussions today, they're going to be more than just deep. We literally don't have words for the direction today's conversation might go into the fourth dimension and beyond. Guthrie Dyce will be our guest and guide us through that landscape. Looks like we got the music now.
what I saw was a metallic object that appeared to be about 30
feet tall. Rather, you don't have to stop.
Yeah.
You keep talking. It's all good.
Feet tall at its highest point.
Give us a shout in the live chat if you get lost today. You very well might, but it's great to see you all here. Hey, Matthew Wyatt, K for Infinity, Tim Elf, great to see you all here. If you're looking for more content and more chatting between these shows, check out our Discord. There's a link in the show description. And if you're looking for even more content to fill the void, make sure you're subscribed over at my channel, Rather Be Squidding. I recently posted a video examining psychic phenomena through the lens of a theoretical fourth spatial dimension. The evidence for extra dimensions is growing. There's even evidence that our own brain grows into this extra dimensional space. The implications are extraordinary, and we'll be discussing some of those today. And, it's almost comical to me that mainstream science scoffs at UFOs and ESP, but embraces the idea of extra dimensions and creating literal universes in a lab. They have their reasons, of course. Things need to be reproducible to be proven. But, just because something is not proven doesn't mean that there's no truth to it. For example, I can't prove that you're all going to have a good time watching this show, but I do believe there's some truth behind that statement. So let's kick things off and see if I'm right. Please welcome fellow hosts Luis Jimenez and UFO Jade.
Hey.
Little glitches at the top there.
I don't know what's going on with the music in StreamYard. I guess it's just not liking the video file. I'm not sure. It's really weird. It just stops playing.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. Take your file out of there because I don't want it to ruin the stream again. This whole stream's ruined now because of you. You ruined the whole show.
It was bound to happen.
I've actually asked the guests and everybody to go home. We're ending the show today early. Real quick before we get started, John Russell with a $50 super chat.
Well, yeah, we did it. Let's set him
please, next time say something. You always say something. I mean, he's always in here saying something. But man, if you're gonna throw down the 50, I wish Jazz.
Maybe he doesn't like the music.
Maybe he doesn't. It's possible. But Jazz, if you're out there, you owe us a shot. Thanks to John Russell. Truly appreciate it, my friend. I want to talk about the super chats at some point in this show because I know there's a part of this community that really hates and gives me a lot of flack, not to my face, but privately, about
that the fact that we collect super chats like any other YouTube channel that exists out there in the planet. But what's even more fun is I'm going to show you how much money I've made in the last 6 months. I'm going to completely be 100% transparent with you guys and sort of give you a peek behind the scenes, because I love being transparent with my audience and sort of what I'm trying to do here. So we'll get into that. But before we do, we've got, of course, pay the bills. So hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO, also emerging tech and futurism. I got it this time. Of course, before we get started, we want to, the music is provided by DOS Tapes. Their Bandcamp link is in the description below. The show is available on podcast. Somebody was complaining that there's too many commercials on the show. If you hate the commercials, go listen to it on podcast because there's no commercials there yet. I think eventually they'll make their way there. But yeah, if you want to go to Spotify, you can listen to it, but you're not going to get the visual. The whole fun about this show sometimes is what's happening visually. So I apologize for commercials, but hey, there's nothing I can do about that. And it's a great way to support the show if you can't do it with a super chat or by joining our Patreon. The beautiful thing about this show is no matter how much you donate, no matter how much you give, there's no paywall. Everybody gets the same show. Everybody gets access to the same show. And I'm really proud of that. And that's something that we're going to continue to do.
Are you telling me that the people who are doing the super chats, they're not being made to do it?
No, they're not being made to do it. There's no gun to their head, Jane. There's no gun.
And you'll still keep streaming even if
nobody donates $1. Yeah.
I just wanted to check.
No, it's a great question. It's a really because a lot of people don't know. Do you force people?
Maybe they don't know that.
I thought it was obvious, but clearly it's not. But please do us a favor: like, subscribe, share this show. We are so close to 5,000 followers. I want to get to 5,000 before the end of the month. I think we can get 150 before the end of the month. I don't know. But do us a favor, share the show because it goes a long way and it's a wonderful way to support. If you love what we're doing here, it's a great way to do it. Of course, we've got our shows every night now on KGRA, so check that out if you're on the road. We're on late nights, I think. I got to look at the schedule, but you can go to KGRA-DB and check out the schedule for the Unidentified Celebrity Review there. I think that's everything.
Yeah, and speaking of bills, I think some more people, I think we're donating on their own volition here.
I don't know.
Got to catch up on.
You think so?
Swink McCloud. We got a.
Look at this. Look. Thank you, Haley. The super chat haters can put this in their pipe and smoke it. I love it. My mom, with a $20. It's a super sticker for my mom. Somebody put a gun to her head and told her to test me. Out of the heart. Daniel Jacobian. I always want to say Jacobson when I see this name. Sorry, Jacobian, with a 25-pound donation for the haters. Thank you, guys. We're going to get to the haters. Yeah, well, we'll save them for the end of the show because they're really not worth it. But what are you going to say, rather?
But aliens may have made Swink McCloud donate, so just a little bit of fuel to the conspiratorial.
There could be a signal that the aliens are sending out to all of these super chat donations. I just love when I do stuff like this. People are like, "Oh yeah, well I'm going to show you," and just start sending money. I mean, thank you. You guys make the show possible. We are a public access channel. We provide a show 5 days a week between 2 channels. So, we do that for you guys. We were doing that before the super chats. We're doing it with the super chats. And it helps me. Whatever. We'll get into it. The philosophies of some people are just absolutely absurd. But let's get to our guest, shall we?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so can't wait.
I'm super excited.
He's a really, really cool dude. His name is Guthrie Dyce, and he is finishing up his PhD in neuroscience, researching spatial attention in mice at the Australian National University. He is broadly interested in science, technology, and society, and he has written for the Naked Scientist and enjoys nerd posting on Twitter. He has been UAP curious ever since Barack Obama told him. Well, did he tell him directly? I mean, we'll dive into that. And the rest of the English-speaking world, that there was something to the subject on the James Corden show, and I do remember that clip. And it's just funny how certain things. That's why I'm a firm believer that this. Disclosure, I think we're in the process of it. Honestly, we've been in this process for 80 plus years, but I think it's really sort of ramping up here in the last 4 years. It's just funny what gets people into it. Like who was the dignitary? Who was the secret official? Who was it the New York Times article that got them hooked into this and now are exploring it on a really intellectual level? So without further ado, Mr. Guthrie Dyce. Guthrie, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Hey Lou. Hey Radha. Hey Jane.
Hey.
It is a pleasure to have you
Thanks
here.
for having me.
So yeah, man, pleasure is ours. So I wanted to read something to kick off this conversation because this is something that you sent me after we had a pretty deep conversation on the Singularity Lab, and it was a lot of fun. And then you sent me this, and I was like, okay, I got to get this guy on the show just because, I mean, he sounds like he's got a really good grasp of this. And did I mute my video? What happened?
That was me, Lou. I thought we were moving into serious conversation here.
Oh, are you trying to take out the music, rather?
I was, yeah. I thought we were.
Okay, yeah, you got no control. You got no control over that anymore. That's all
we
me.
Can jam and do serious conversation.
I mean, I was about to do it after I read this little introduction. Jeez, rather, you don't have control of the music anymore.
At least he's not changing the music.
Yeah, this is true. Okay, so Guthrie writes after this show. Something occurred to me while watching the Singularity Lab today, and I thought it might tickle your brain. A second dimension of time was raised early on. Imagine for a moment that a second time dimension to the space-time continuum exists. A second temporal dimension can intuitively be interpreted to imply parallel timelines, or more colloquially, parallel universes exist. We know space-time with a single temporal dimension operates relativistic. Somebody help me out here.
Relativistically.
Thank you. Relativistically. That's a big one. No, sorry. A clock on Earth ticks more slowly than a clock in a geostationary orbit due to gravitational time dilation. We might reasonably wonder whether space-time in two temporal dimensions would operate relative. I'm the guy. I can't say it.
Relativistically
one more time.
as well.
Thank you, Guthrie. It might not even be a stretch to wonder whether a clock on Earth in timeline 1 might tick more slowly than a clock on Earth in timeline 2. This seems strikingly reminiscent of Lou Elizondo's cigar analogy. The analogy goes, the ash is the past, the cherry is the present, the region yet to burn is the future. The interesting point is that the cigar may not even burn evenly. To stretch this analogy a little further, parallel timelines along the cigar would be parallel timelines. In other words, if there is a second temporal dimensions resulting in parallel timelines, it's not inconceivable that some timelines might be futuristic relative to ours. This would be one way of combining the interdimensional and future humans hypothesis. Just a fun thought experiment.
Yes.
That was awesome. All right. So where do we go? Okay. So where do we go from there, Guthrie? I guess I'm going to give you the floor and sort of and let you sort of take this discussion, because I this is so above my pay grade and super chat pay grade that I don't think I can do it justice. So the floor is yours, my good man. And by the way, I hope I haven't missed any super chats. I'm sorry to cut you off there real quick, but there was one from NP. Rather held me up with a tic tac and forced me to send this with a $30 super chat.
You're welcome, Lou.
Thank you so much for that. Rather, for threatening our fans in the show. Then Jared with a 99-cent super sticker. You guys are unbelievable. Event Tide, $5. Gangster Rap made me do it. Rick Karakis with a $2 donation says thank you, and Ethereal Aura with a £3 super sticker. So thank you guys. You guys always come strong on that stuff, and I truly appreciate it. All right, so let's get into it. Guthrie, what do you got for us?
Okay, well, for starters, about things being above your pay grade, just wanted to emphasize as a disclaimer that, my thesis is about attention in mice, and it's not about quantum physics. So, this is going to be an informal kind of chat.
Fair.
But I do work with multi-dimensional data sets, and it's not uncommon for those to have more than 4 dimensions, bearing in mind that a dimension is really just it's a measurable extent or a measurable thing. So I was doing some work and listening to the Singularity Lab, and someone brought up this idea of a second temporal dimension, and I had a sense that that would imply the existence of a multiverse, but I wanted to be able to clearly articulate why. And so I got very distracted, and I, long story short, ended up writing this blog post. And as I was doing this, I got, again, quite excited and was messaging Lou and Rather and Mike and Daniel and everyone that I've got on kind of DMs. And it turns out there is actually a pretty good reason to suspect that if you were to add a dimension to our space-time continuum, you would go from having a universe to a multiverse,
right?
Provided that extra dimension was kind of extended and like our spatial dimensions, unlike the curled up teeny tiny dimensions that someone like Michio Kaku would talk about in string theory. So that's kind of a neat little demonstration that you can do using lower dimensional examples, and we can get to that. But once I'd sort of said, okay, well, that makes sense, I thought, does this idea of a multiverse fit into any mainstream physics? And it turns out there's something in quantum theory called the many worlds interpretation, and that's also something worth talking about without getting into the weeds too much. That'll be a bit of a fine line to tread. And again, I'm not an expert, so if there are any experts, please, I'd be all ears if you want to have a chat about the details. So yeah, there are a couple of reasons that I wanted to talk to you guys about it, and that is that firstly, yeah, the interdimensional and future humans hypotheses can really easily be combined when you're thinking about this kind of multiverse model. And the other thing is that Lou Elizondo's cigar analogy just kind of falls very naturally out of the bottom. And I thought, well, that's worth sharing. So so yeah, maybe go on, Rather.
Yeah. I mean, I this is all super interesting. I think kind of one of the first questions is, is there, like, what evidence do we have that there is potentially another spatial dimension? And I know that you kind of related that to superposition and how that kind of suggests that there might be another kind of dimension beyond, the 3 spatial dimensions we know. Can you maybe elaborate on your thinking behind that a little bit?
Sure. I think that's a good place to start. So it's superposition. It's good to sort of understand the relationship between that and potentially sort of additional dimensions on a conceptual level, and then go to the idea of quantum superposition and the idea of the many worlds interpretation. So, you can all do this at home if you've got a piece of paper and a pen. If you draw yourself a line on a piece of paper, you can visualize a one-dimensional space, and that one-dimensional space has only got length forward and back, for example. And if we were one-dimensional beings, we'd probably have a lot of difficulty imagining a second dimension. And the easiest way we might be able to imagine it is if someone said, well, okay, imagine there was another one-dimensional space. Imagine there was a parallel length, a parallel universe, if such one-dimensional beings have the concept of parallel. Don't think about it too hard, right? So if you've drawn yourself this one-dimensional space and you draw an adjacent one-dimensional space, one line and an adjacent line, the 2 lines are parallel. Those 2 lines are separated with respect to a second dimension. Let's call it width, right? But they are in superposition. They occupy all the same space in terms of the dimension of length. So from a one-dimensional perspective, if we were one-dimensional beings living on that universe of length, and we were to try to imagine a parallel length, a parallel universe, we would sort of imagine it to be in superposition, occupying the same space as our dimension, because in one dimension it does occupy the same space. We would have more difficulty imagining how it is separated in terms of a second dimension. And you can kind of go from here and say, okay, how do I go from a one-dimensional space to a two-dimensional space? Two-dimensional space being a plane, like an infinitely thin sheet of paper. You can say, well, I can sort of make a two-dimensional space by having an infinite continuum of parallel one-dimensional spaces sort of stitched together. And that gives me like a sheet, a two-dimensional space. And then you get the same idea of like superposition and extra dimensions if you go from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. So you have your plane, your sheet of paper, and you say, okay, I'm a 2-dimensional being now. And how might I imagine a parallel universe? Well, that would be like a parallel plane above or below the plane that I live on. And that plane would be occupying all the same 2-dimensional space that my universe occupies, but it would be separate with respect to a third dimension of depth. So again, you've got this idea of superposition, or the appearance of superposition, kind of hinting at the potential existence of an extra dimension. And so you can go from stitching together an infinite continuum of planes adjacent with respect to depth, and that'll give you like a cube, a 3-dimensional space. And then you can say, okay, well, our fourth dimension is time. If you have one instant in time, that's like a one configuration of a 3-dimensional space. And if we were 3-dimensional beings, we would similarly have a lot of difficulty imagining multiple moments in time if we were capable of imagining without time, right? So you can think about time as an infinite continuum of 3-dimensional spaces kind of stitched together in a fourth dimension. And one of the important things here is that every time we're adding...
I'm sorry, this is really good. I don't want to stop you, but have we proven it's still theoretical that time is a fourth dimension, correct? Or is that...
Well, as far as I understand it, it's in relativity, we think about space-time as one continuum. And again, I think it's harder to probably think about it if you get mixed up with the idea of exactly space in an intuitive sense with the 3 spatial dimensions that we're talking about. Time is certainly an additional dimension, and it is certainly orthogonal to the 3 spatial dimensions that we're familiar with.
It's intuitive the way you're explaining it. I wonder, like, is this something that they teach as fact in school, or almost as fact in school yet, or is it still just theoretical, if that makes sense?
Well, again, I haven't studied relativity at university.
Right, it's like pay grade question. But yeah, you can keep going. I was just curious how theoretical or accepted it was. That was all. Yeah.
So what we can say is that time is independent of the 3 spatial dimensions.
Right.
And in the same way that width is independent of length, or depth is independent of length and width. So even though it's a different kind of dimension in some sense, it still has the same kind of relationship to the 3 spatial dimensions that those spatial dimensions have to each other. So,
well, I know I've heard Michio Kaku describe, and he is a theoretical physicist, and you know how much I love him, but he has said that humans tend to forget that we live in 4 dimensions. And he said height, width, depth, and time.
So it's got to be, yeah.
I'm sure it is theoretical, but I do like your point, Jane, of it being like time does fluctuate depending on where you are and what the gravity is, right? So it is in a way malleable. I guess would
Yes.
probably be the best.
I feel like I see it. It's way above my head. I just feel like I'll see debates out there still about it, you know, and so I just, not being really from that world, I just, and I'm sure we'll go beyond. I don't know if we'll go beyond 4 dimensions, but I'm curious where we're crossing the line of.
I'll try to be,
you know,
clear.
the mainstream.
Yeah.
So Michio Kaku, I guess, physics, right? Versus probably the truth, right? The future.
Someone said I'm a kakusexual, and that's true. I'll own that. I am a kakusexual.
So certainly in Einstein's relativity, you have time stretching and space stretching in much the same way. And in fact, in Einstein's relativity, you don't think about really time being distinct from the 3 dimensions of space. They talk about space-time as a continuum. So in that respect, it is pretty kind of mainstream to think about it as just another dimension. And whether that's kind of space in the really intuitive way that we think about it, or space in a more abstract way, I think at some point it becomes kind of irrelevant. But I think it is really important to be clear about, you know, when this is speculation and when it's not. And I'll do my best to kind of.
Well, you did a really great job of explaining that. I mean, I think you've done a better job than any YouTube video has explained the 4D, you know, the visualization of it. So, yeah, by no means, I don't want to stop you.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Do interrupt anytime.
Yeah.
Rather, what were you going to say? I can see it on your face.
Well, yeah, you know, I love this. I think that, you know, time as a dimension is interesting because there's a clear relationship between, you know, the previous step in time and the next step in time. Like we know that this notebook is going to be, you know, somewhere within light speed of this notebook in the next time step. But, you know, when we talk about the orthogonal, completely different spatial dimensions, what's there, right?
Right.
Like, is there any relation?
So the thing to remind ourselves about when we're trying to go from 4 dimensions, which is fairly intuitive, 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time, to perhaps a 5th dimension, is that every time we've gone from, you know, 1 dimension to 2 dimensions, we've essentially multiplied the space. If you have just one parallel length going from 1 dimension to 2 dimensions, you have now, you know, twice as many positions that you can occupy. And if you are going from one 2-dimensional plane to many 2-dimensional planes, in other words, a 3-dimensional space, you're multiplying what you previously had in terms of spatial coordinates. And then the same thing when you're adding a 4th dimension, you have every position that is possible in 3 dimensions, but then you have a 4th dimension. So you can have that same position at moment 1 or moment 2 or moment 3 or moment 4, and so on and so on and so on. And so then if you add a 5th dimension, it makes sense that you would say, okay, well, how do I imagine this? Previously, when I went from 1 dimensions to 2 dimensions, I had these parallel lengths, and they were, you know, in superposition in 1 dimension, but separated with respect to a 2nd dimension. So if I go from 4 dimensions to 5 dimensions, I can have a second 4-dimensional space that is in 4-dimensional superposition with my 4-dimensional space, but it is separated with respect to a 5th dimension. And so another way of thinking about that is I've got a timeline, I've got a universe that is in 4-dimensional superposition with my universe, but it is separate somehow with respect to a 5th dimension. And the question, the hardest thing to sort of understand about that is, well, what is this distance, this extent that is separating these 2 universes? And that gets into the kind of the quantum theory idea. But first, I would say, perhaps on a more intuitive level, we sort of think in terms of 5 dimensions every day. Every time you have thought to yourself, what is going to happen if I do X as opposed to Y? Every time we try to predict the future and we've got multiple outcomes in our minds, we are sort of trying to navigate in our minds a probability space. And this kind of connects to the idea of why adding this extra dimension is at all like having a second dimension of time. Because in a sense, and you were talking about this rather, time is associated with probability. It's intimately linked to this idea of entropy. So entropy is kind of this fancy word for disorder. If you've got something that's very organized, like a droplet of food dye, and you put it into a glass of water, the food dye distributes itself in the glass of water. It doesn't stay concentrated. And in fact, the second law of thermodynamics tells us that entropy always increases with time. And so there's always an increase in sort of disorder, or the number of ways that things can be organized always increases. And that idea of entropy is linked with the idea of probability. There's more ways that the food dye can be organized in a distributed way in the glass of water than there are ways that it can be organized in just one concentrated drop, and that's why it spreads out. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes actually really good sense. I like that.
So in a sense,
go ahead.
Time is a kind of probability space already, because it is so intimately connected with entropy. And so then you can think about, well, this fifth dimension, we can think of it also as a probability space, in that when we're trying to imagine the future, we're not sure. It's almost like we're not sure which timeline we're occupying, you know? And so it's just another configuration that things might have turned out in. A different timeline. You can think about it as a different outcome in 4 dimensions. You know?
Wow. Well, let me ask. Somebody had a question here real quick, and I'm curious what you think about this. Muskoka Jay asks, is consciousness the 5th dimension?
Well, I don't know about that. I would say that we are 4-dimensional beings capable of contemplating a 5th dimension, because we're capable of contemplating alternative pasts and alternative futures. But I suppose you could say that, you know, the discussion of free will would be an argument about whether we are 4-dimensional beings constrained by fate but capable of imagining a 5th dimension, or in fact 5-dimensional beings who are the masters of our own destinies and capable of navigating in a 5th dimension and choosing which timeline we occupy. Does that make sense? I see Rather is kind of smiling.
Ooh, yeah.
Well, this is right up Rather's alley here, man.
Yeah, that was the part of your paper that really kind of struck my interest. Well, I mean, it was all very interesting, but that in particular. And I did a little Googling, and I actually found a paper, and there were some scientists who actually, looked at brain activity, and they're positing that, the looking at the brain activity, we can kind of see that it suggests that the brain might actually be literally a hypersphere in structure and be in, a 4th spatial dimension. I'm curious if that's kind of where you're going with that, or if you're looking at that kind of more of a theoretical layer.
I was thinking about it more on a theoretical layer, and it goes back to the sort of the informal way that I was thinking about it. So I kind of kept the brain science for my post separate from the theoretical side of things. I am aware that you've got Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, and they've got a theory of quantum consciousness, and they're probably not the only ones. And I can't really comment on that. When it comes to brain activity, I think it's another whole story. Probably I could go on for hours about the brain. And I don't know, I guess, would be the answer to that. The relationship between the brain and, yes, potential extra dimensions.
Please,
you're kind of on that top.
No, go ahead. Please dive into it, because that sounds like fun. But no, what were you going to ask?
Well, on that topic, you're a neuroscientist, or getting your PhD, and you mentioned that you weren't, quantum physics didn't really play a lot of a role into, that, and that's kind of my current understanding of neurophysics or neuroscience, is that they don't really get into that quantum space. But then, I also have read some articles about things like, we can smell the different isotopes at a atomic quantum level. And so there does seem to clearly be some quantum interactions in the brain. I know this is kind of an aside, but I'm curious, do they address that at all, or is that kind of hasn't reached mainstream yet?
It's intuitive to me that we might be able to smell different isomers because you have a sort of handedness of molecules, and they can be organized in as mirror images of each other, and that might bind to a receptor in a sort of classical mechanics way differently, depending on the configuration or the handedness of the molecule. I haven't heard about us being able to smell the difference between different isotopes. So say you have carbon-14 instead of carbon-12, or the individual atoms having different numbers of neutrons and being slightly heavier or slightly lighter. That's something that I haven't heard of. So I'd be interested to read about that. But
yeah, I'll send you a link. I think it was a fairly recent study, but it is unintuitive and interesting.
Yeah, it is counterintuitive. From what I have learned, it's not what I've been taught. Quantum physics is not currently generally thought to play much of a role in brain function. And again, there are some people who sort of disagree with that. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff have this theory that the microtubules, sort of the cellular architecture of your brain cells, that these structures are somehow capable of encoding information using sort of quantum effects. And my understanding is that, based on the difficulties we have with quantum computing, usually what we have to do is cool the system that we're trying to use to store information. Usually we have to cool those systems down to near absolute zero, because the heat that is associated with just room temperature tends to interact with these really, really delicate quantum systems that we're talking about, and essentially will force those systems to become entangled with the environment in some way. And that's actually kind of, it gets back to what I was going to talk about with the multiple universes.
Oh, I had so I have a question about the multiple universe thing. So with this 5D, okay, so we're 4D going through time, like we've got the 3D box going through time, right? And then we have it branching off, right? Because it could go up, it could go right, could go different ways, right? Are we imagining like this is one planet Earth along this timeline, or a single human being along this timeline?
Be the entire universe. And
so the entire universe, right? So this would truly be, so this isn't necessarily on the individual level. Like I'm looking at, my 5D version of myself. This is 5D version of the universe. So in our reality, I guess maybe free will is a moot point, right? Because every universe is as it is. I suppose, I guess, in that, that was a distinction I wanted to try to. So consciousness could be just completely outside that, right? Like just our personal experience of this, I guess. But
it makes all sorts of things a little bit difficult to understand. Like if you really think about the idea of a multiverse and every possible thing happening, then this is one of the criticisms of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, that probability in some way becomes a bit harder to understand. Like what is probability? What is the probability of one thing happening if everything happens? And it's sort of, there are all sorts of quite nuanced criticisms of the many worlds interpretation, and I'm not qualified really to say whether or not the many worlds interpretation is correct. I'm basically just saying, here's an idea that at least some experts still kind of take seriously. And there is in fact a name for these kind of multiverse models. They're called brain cosmologies. Nothing to do with the brain, but it's a sort of BRANE, like the 4-dimensional equivalent of a plane, two-dimensional space, right? So these brane cosmologies, you can go on Google Scholar or wherever you like and look up. You'll find a number of papers about these and the relationship between, potential relationship between dark matter and dark energy and these things. And the trouble is, a sort of spoiler alert with these things, that when you have so much freedom to imagine how such a universe might work, it becomes very difficult to really nail that model down to reality and test it, because it's in a way it becomes quite flexible. So what I wanted to sort of get back to is we've got this 5-dimensional space. We've got this multiverse idea, and I wanted to say, what does this have to do? Does this have anything to do with mainstream physics? What does it have to do with quantum theory? And I've been talking about this idea of the many worlds interpretation, and what is that? And what has it got to do with superposition or quantum superposition? What is that? And I thought maybe a good way of kind of introducing this would be to talk about the double slit experiment.
Yeah.
So the double slit experiment is very interesting. Essentially what it involves is getting an emitter of, say, photons, and photons being these tiny little quantum systems. And you can shoot a photon across a room and through a room divider that has 2 finely spaced slits in it. And then at the other end of the room, you can have a detector where you're trying to measure from the interaction that the photon makes with that system where the photon hits on that detector. So you can shoot this photon across the room, through the room divider and into the detector 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, and you can see where it hits the detector. And what you would expect is that the photon goes through either one slit or the other slit, and what you'd end up with is 2 bands on the detector. But in fact, what happens if you do this is you end up with many bands on the detector. And you get that kind of pattern when you have a wave that passes through the same kind of thing, the same 2 openings. When a wave passes through 2 openings, 2 small waves come out the other end, and those 2 small waves interfere with each other, and it creates an interference pattern sort of at the very back. And so what the results of this experiment will tell you is it is as though this single photon, this one particle, is going across the room, passing through both slits in the wall at the same time, interfering with itself, and then at the detector sort of collapsing down into one position. So the exact position that the photon is measured in, that is random, in that it could, within the sort of the bands that it will inevitably fall into, it can occupy any of those bands, any position. And this kind of mixture between particle-like behavior and wave-like behavior and randomness and sort of intuitive deterministic behavior, that's very confusing. And famously, Einstein said, God does not play with dice. He thought the idea of this thing being in multiple places at once, going through 2 holes at the same time, he thought that was weird. And he thought that the idea of it hitting this detector, and even though it obeys a sort of probability law in terms of where it can land on that detector, the exact position each time you do it that it lands in being random, Einstein really didn't like that. So conventionally in quantum mechanics, there's this idea of the Copenhagen interpretation. There's this idea of wave function collapse. They say, okay, you've got this beautiful bit of mathematics that describes where the photon is in space and the states that it has, and it sort of says that this photon is, it describes the photon as sort of occupying multiple places at once. Superposition, right? Quantum superposition. And then when it hits the detector, it just takes one distinct position. And so they talk about this wave function, this distributed bit of mathematics collapsing down into one point when you get a measurement. And that is something that seems a bit sort of ad hoc. The criticism of the Copenhagen interpretation, which talks about this wave function collapse, is that it is sort of like, oh, well, we can't really understand why why you've got this wave-like behavior and then suddenly it stops being wave-like. So we're just going to invent this thing called wave function collapse. And some physicists didn't like that. And so this guy called Everett came up with something called the many worlds interpretation. He said, well, you know, the mathematics is telling us that this photon is in multiple places at once, and the results in some sense only make sense if the photon can go through both slits at the same time and occupy multiple positions at once. And you know, maybe we should just trust the maths. Maybe this distributed wave function that we've got, maybe it's real, and maybe every possible measurement that we could have received actually did happen, but in a different world. And so that's kind of, he wrote his PhD thesis about this, and it's still kind of floating around and being talked about now and then.
Is it almost like the waves are time traveling? You know, it's like we're just seeing it appear everywhere, but you know, it's doing every possibility, you know, like behind the scenes. Like that's just so crazy fascinating.
It is really weird. Quantum mechanics is really weird, and my tutor in the only course that I ever took that dealt with quantum mechanics said that it's a bit like a kitchen full of Tupperware, and there's always one cupboard that's open, and that cupboard represents a sort of counterintuitive thing. And if you try and close that one cupboard, another one pops open. And that's how he explained the fact that you've got all these different interpretations of the maths to try and have a nice story about what it actually means. But all of them are a bit counterintuitive. So one of the interpretations, you talked about time traveling waves. One of the interpretations was that this photon sort of is guided along a carrier wave. And this was an idea that's called Bohmian mechanics. And the idea behind this was that the randomness of quantum mechanics was not appealing to people. So they wanted to make it more deterministic. So they said, okay, we'll invent this carrier wave and we'll fiddle with the maths, and there we go. Now it's deterministic. The only problem is that now, if you do that, what you get is causation that is symmetrical with respect to time. So now photons from the future can cause things to happen in the present. Right. And that's really counterintuitive as well. So again, I'm not going to say that, you know, the many worlds interpretation is correct, or Bohmian mechanics is correct, or the Copenhagen interpretation and wave function collapse is correct. I don't know. I'm just saying, here's an idea, and if we kind of play with that idea, what happens? You know?
Yeah. So, you know, let's assume that, you know, the multi-worlds is true. You know, with the double slit experiment, when we kind of show that potentially we, you know, our electrons in whatever our universe are interfering with electrons from other universes, does that kind of imply to you that, you know, somehow we can like transcend that space in between these parallel timelines and maybe reach over and talk to our neighbors in a parallel universe?
So I did think about this. Like, would it be possible to, you know, communicate or interact between parallel universes, and what would that mean? And so I had a bit of a read into this many worlds interpretation and what these physicists think about the process of the splitting of the worlds and how they describe it. And basically the many worlds theorists, they say there's no wave function collapse. Instead, what happens is a quantum system, it gets entangled with the environment. It's sort of the weirdness of that quantum system bleeds into the environment, and it just appears to collapse because of that interaction and the sort of
kind of
the
like
combination.
The dye in the water.
Right, a bit like the dye in the water, a bit like friction is the way that they describe it on Wikipedia anyway. So there's this idea of decoherence. That's the word that they use to describe this bleeding of quantum properties into the environment. And it seems that there's a correspondence, from what I've read, between decoherence and entanglement. So if a particle becomes entangled with the environment, it's said to decohere. And decoherence is supposed to never be complete. the universe as a whole is meant to retain its sort of superposition, and hence the idea that there might be multiple universes on top of each other, so to speak. And any interaction that is going to produce this decoherence, or you might call it a wave function collapse if you're doing the Copenhagen thing, in the many worlds interpretation, any interaction that produces decoherence is supposed to produce a splitting of the universe. And so then you're starting to get this idea that, okay, well, for us lay people who can't do the maths, right? If decoherence and entanglement is resulting in the splitting of our universe from other universes, what if we could recohere? What if we could disentangle some bubble of our universe from its surroundings and put it into a state
I
of...
don't know if we
of-
want to do that, Guthrie.
Right, I mean-
I don't
So
know
that
if
means
we
there's
want to
two
do that.
Boos?
I mean, even if we could do it, would we?
I wouldn't be the first to volunteer. That's for sure.
sure.
Yeah.
That is for sure. It almost sounds like
I mean,
that Stephen King book. What is it? The Mist, where they like the army was messing around with like some time temporal thing, and then boom! All of a sudden, all of these crazy creatures from different dimensions are on Earth, and we have no idea what to do with it. It was just literally an accident.
Yeah.
Wow. What were you going to
That
say?
kind of
James?
sounds
Sorry.
like Skinwalker Ranch.
A little bit.
Or it's
A
like
little bit.
Inside Out, where they go through the D-dimensional. I don't know what they call it, but they all turn into cartoon characters and start falling apart, or in 2001 A Space Odyssey. I won't give it away if you haven't seen that movie.
Please go see that movie.
So would wave collapse, because I want to, this is so complex. I want to make sure I'm following. Wave collapse, would it be a better way to put like wave complex? Like it just gets so complicated and big that we don't understand it anymore and it doesn't look the same anymore. Is that's what's kind of happening there?
I think it's kind of what's happening. It's certainly it's getting too complex for me to think about it. When it interacts.
Maybe I'm just
with the
projecting here, guys.
No, I think you're right. And so if you look into it, they'll say that again, this idea of coherence. Coherence is supposed to be related to literally the sort of the wave properties. So waves have a certain phase. You could say that if you're at the ocean and you're looking at the waves, the phase of those waves would be, whether there's a wave that's hit the shore or whether it's about to hit the shore or whether it's just hit the shore. Is phase, that's kind of like phase relationship of waves. And coherence, I think, has something to do with the phase relationship of a quantum system, and perhaps coherence with other quantum systems around it. And it's really getting out of my depth at that point, Well,
I think it's going to start getting out of the depths of a lot of human brains. I'm wondering if you're going to need like a supercomputer to figure something like this out.
Right.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that people are working on this stuff, and they in fact, you can find papers where people are, for quantum computers, they need to work with this idea of decoherence, because what they're trying to do is sort of preserve a little bit of reality, like an electron, say, in a state where it sort of does have multiple states at once. And in a classical computer, you have a transistor, which it can allow electricity to pass, or it can not allow electricity to pass. And so that's a sort of a physically grounded way of thinking about digital information. You've got a 1 and you've got a 0. Whereas the idea with a quantum computer is that you can sort of create the same thing, a qubit instead of a bit, except that it's capable of encoding both 1 and 0 at the same time. And so there's a lot of work currently going on trying to control these quantum systems, manipulate, just how coherent they are. And I saw a paper recently that was talking about trying to regenerate the coherence that had been lost when two quantum systems became entangled. And so that's kind of one of the things that got me thinking about, okay, well, maybe if we can do recoherence, disentanglement, so to speak, on two little quantum systems, maybe if we could do that at like a macroscopic scale, then you'd be able to sort of get a bubble of 4-dimensional space and basically detach it from your universe and have it adrift in this 5-dimensional multiverse.
Wow.
And then I thought, okay, well, there's no good just being adrift forever. You need to get it to re-entangle with a different universe.
Right.
And, if that is at all analogous to this wave function collapse, then you'd have no idea really which universe you'd end up in, which isn't great, obviously. But, I thought, well, if you've got people working on quantum computers and trying to control this process of decoherence and recoherence, maybe if you got really fantastic at doing that, you might have a bit more hope of kind of, navigating if such a thing was possible. So that's kind of the quantum stuff that I wanted to talk about.
Well, real quick before you get to the next thing you want to talk about, because I want to get this question in, and we got a couple of things also in the chat that I just want to address. The first is from our friend Manny Miranda, and he asks, the prefrontal cortex is like a simulation engine. Would that be the best place to start looking for 4D possibilities?
So yeah, the prefrontal cortex is basically the way that our brains work. We think is that you've got primary sensory cortices. You've got like the bunch of cells in the back of your head, which is your visual cortex. You've got cells kind of up here, which is your somatosensory cortex. You've got an auditory cortex. You've got bits of cortex that do all of your different types of sensation. And those bits of cortex essentially start off in the visual example, the cells will be working on like pixels or small fragments of visual space. And then slowly, as those cells kind of send their information to other cells, and other cells pool the information from many little pixels together, as you kind of go up the hierarchy of the brain, you get more and more, larger and larger pictures being encoded by the activity of those cells. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So as you get to the prefrontal cortex, you've got a region of the brain that is essentially able to see a large picture of the world. And it's also encoding planning on some level. Like not necessarily the immediate plan, the next thing that you're about to do with your finger or nodding your head or blinking your eyes or something like that. Perhaps a few steps removed, a bit more abstract, maybe more long-term plans, right, strategies and rule sets. We don't understand fantastically well what the neurons in the prefrontal cortex are doing, but we do think it is involved in simulating the environment at a sort of large scale, and perhaps testing out possible futures, predicting the future, and guiding what the rest of the brain is doing, so that it is kind of in tune with what you predict is going to happen next.
No, I thought thank you. And UFO Humper 3000. Look, I don't pick these names. They're just that's is what it is. It says, I like the show. Wiggle your mustache, please. You heard him, Jane. Jane does not have a mustache, obviously. There you go. There's the mustache wiggle.
But I feel like that needed a sound effect for some reason.
And then Jazz Shaw says, I'm not going back to smoking pot to try and keep up with this conversation.
Sorry, Jazz.
No, it's okay. I mean, okay, so before you get on to this next step, and we've got Dan Warren popping in, and look, this is like, we got to do a time experiment on the show, because every time we get into these wonderful conversations, it feels like you've only been here for 15 or 20 minutes, but we've almost been here an hour. It's a time machine. But yeah, I mean, what were you going to get into after that?
Because I kind of promised to talk about the interdimensional and future humans and Lou Elizondo's cigar analogy, maybe I'll just cut to the chase with that, right?
Yeah.
So this whole time we've been talking about, okay, we got how might we understand a 5-dimensional universe, and is there any basis for that in physics? So we sort of talked about that. Now, if you have a 5-dimensional universe, and you can imagine if you have a parallel Earth, you could imagine that that parallel Earth could be a little bit further out from the sun than us. You mentioned gravity distorting time, I think, at the start, Lou. So time goes more slowly on Earth than it does in a satellite in geostationary orbit. In the same way, time on one Earth that is closer to the sun would go more slowly than time on a second Earth that is a bit further away from the sun. So if you did have a parallel universe in which Earth was, say, 1.5 times the distance from the sun, it would still be in the habitable zone of our star, but it would be subject to less time dilation. And in fact, if you go online and you go into a gravitational time dilation calculator, which can do the maths, and you run this experiment for 4.5 billion years, which is about the age of the Earth, what you find is that the more distant planet Earth would be 15 years ahead of our planet Earth. And so essentially what that example gives you is a way of imagining multiple timelines which are potentially, they have different rates at which time is progressing relative to each other.
Right.
And so then you can imagine if there was perhaps an Earth that had never been hit by a meteor or an asteroid 65 million years ago, very many different things might have happened. Or if you listen to Graham Hancock, and he thinks the Earth was hit by a comet or an asteroid 12,800 years ago, and that kind of set human civilization back by a few thousand years. If that had never happened, then you might have a reason to suspect that you'd have a much more sort of advanced civilization on Earth. Any of these things being true, and if anyone was capable of cracking interdimensional travel, then you might have a way of saying, okay, well, there might be parallel timelines that are relatively futuristic compared to us. And if they were capable of traveling between the two universes that separate us, it would appear to us as though future humans were visiting us. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of the combination of the interdimensional and future humans hypothesis. And I think because of Lou Elizondo's cigar analogy, I think that's what he was talking about. Yeah. I think that these people who are talking to Ross Coulthard and Frank Milburn and frankly even perhaps Lou Elizondo, I think that there is this idea that we may be living in a multiverse among this group that is pushing for, UAP transparency. I suspect that that's a kind of working hypothesis.
That's
well, yeah, I for one support our multiverse future human overlords.
If they're overlords, I mean, it is interesting. Like, if they're that idea that this parallel version of ourselves is at a different, at a different space from the sun. So therefore they're 15. I like the idea of thinking maybe even, 50, 100, 200 years ahead of where we are at technologically. And they've got the capability. They figured out the science and how to untangle themselves and to pop into this timeline and what that would appear to us as. And I think you start getting dino beavers, you may start getting portal holes, you may start getting big-eyed creatures that visit you in the night. Who knows how that manifests itself or in what form it manifests itself to. So I think that's a really beautiful hypothesis into sort of what a lot of people who have a lot of skin in this game, especially experiencers, might be dealing with. And I think that's just a really fun way to look at it.
Yeah, and I encourage anyone who's kind of interested in this stuff to read the blog post that I wrote, because it's and
that's the one you shared with me privately, correct?
Yeah, it's on. I probably did share it with you once I'd released it. Certainly, I put it on my
the blog post that you shared on Twitter, and it's very long. Like
yes.
20 tweets. Okay. I'm not saying that in an offensive way. I read through it and I wanted you to break it down for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share that in the chat with everybody. So if you guys want to sort of read what Guthrie's laying down, you can do that. So I'm going to pop that in right now. What were you going to say, rather?
Yeah, it's dense with information and really, really interesting. I'd advise you all to check it out.
Yeah,
thanks.
And I'm popping that in right now, so you guys can bookmark that. So let me real quickly get to this idea, because I asked Lou, because the cigar analogy it just makes so much sense to me, especially the cherry part of it, where it's like all of these things are firing off at the exact same time, even though they're in the exact same space. They're being burned at the exact same time. I asked Lou, and I'm just going to ask you, if it is, say, a cigarette or a cigar, and the ash is the past, that cherry is the present, and what we're literally doing as we speak, and then the unsmoked part of the cigar is the future, there's got to be somebody smoking this cigar, right? Like there's got to be someone who lit the cigar. There's got to be someone who, as soon as they're done, I mean, what do we as humans, when we're done with a cigarette, or in Jazz's case, a joint, when you're done with it, you usually toss it. You usually throw it away. You throw it to the curb. You put it out. So I'm curious to know what is smoking the cigar? Do you have a theory on that?
I think, I did talk about in the blog post, it's called The Dark Multiverse, or just Another Brain Cosmology, something like that. And I did talk about potential relationship between dark matter, dark energy, and this idea of a multiverse. And so dark energy is this thing that's driving the universe to accelerate in its expansion. The universe is expanding from the Big Bang, but it's also accelerating in its expansion. Right. And so I thought, well, if you have, essentially an entire multiverse kind of sitting on top of our universe, and each one of these universes is expanding, perhaps they are acting on each other gravitationally, and because they're all slightly different in their configurations, perhaps they're essentially all ripping each other apart. And there's something called cosmic inflation, which is another kind of bit of mainstream physics that I talk about, which essentially says that during the Big Bang, space was expanding faster than the speed of light, if I'm not mistaken. And so I kind of wonder sometimes whether, if dark energy makes space expand too fast, are we going to create another Big Bang? Is it going to start expanding as fast as it was expanding during the inflationary period? Are we going to end up with just another universe? Or I have no idea. But I think at the end of the day, you can always ask why. Even if you go to Lawrence Krauss or one of these really straight edge kind of quantum physicists, you can say, okay, well, you say that we can get a universe out of nothing, right? Because the laws of quantum mechanics say so. Well, okay, why those laws? There's, as far as I'm concerned, you're either going to be dealing with an infinite causal regression of some kind, where every explanation invokes another question and needs another explanation, or you bottom out with something like, that's just the way it is.
Right.
So those are basically our two options, and they're both kind of paradoxical. As Terry Pratchett said, it's turtles all the way down.
Well, we still do science. We still do experiments, and people make fun of it for spending taxpayer money. We still do science experiments proving assumptions we all make or things we all take for granted. I mean, that's what science is you can't make assumptions, and that's just the way it is. It's the worst, one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always I hate that. It is what it is. If I hear that one more time, I'm going to absolutely lose my mind. But now I become Death made a really fun joke as far as who's smoking the cigar. It's George Burns. Duh. I mean, I don't. That might fly over your head there, one. Do you know who George Burns is?
No, I'm just
No,
grinning.
yeah. All right, I didn't think so. I know who George. That's like a generational joke. That's definitely for me. Rather, do you know who George Burns is?
I'm vaguely aware of it.
You don't know who George Burns is. So George Burns was just one of these, very famous actors back in the day, and he did a couple of movies where he plays God. And he's just really funny because his thing was he just smokes a cigar. Doesn't matter what movie, what film, what role. There was no like acting that he did. He was just George Burns. He showed up and that's who he was. So that's a funny joke. I truly, George Burns equals God, essentially.
Exactly.
But
payment in cigars.
There you go. So Guthrie, I know this was a conversation you were insanely looking forward to. I can't think of any other questions that I should have right now, because I mean you did a really eloquent job of explaining how this theory can not explain, but at least it's a theory, sort of give us an idea of why we're seeing such crazy shit. And why these eyewitness testimonies vary from, again, from dino beavers to, aliens, mantises kidnapping them in the middle of the night. Rather, you're smiling. What do you got?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a interesting, this discussion is, a lot of this stuff is just so out there, right? These possibility of different dimensions and stuff, but it's incredible. Science is really considering these possibilities as like the explanation to why we are all here, why the universe is here, and everything, and it seems counterintuitive that science seems to be almost weirder than a lot of the discussions in UFOlogy.
They really are.
I think is fascinating. I have a ton of more questions. I wish I could spend more time with you, Guthrie, about dark matter and
we can. Well, we could bring Dan Warren in. Well, let's bring in Dan Warren, and then we'll melt into sort of what's happening with HR 4350 with Dan, because I know he's paying close attention to it, just like I am. But let's ask those questions. Rather, I don't want Guthrie. Do you have to go anywhere?
Well, I might just run to the bathroom very quickly.
Run to the bathroom. The bathroom. Yeah, absolutely. We'll take you off screen here, and then we'll get some dark matter questions for you.
Okay.
All right. So while Guthrie runs to the restroom, let's go ahead and bring in our friend of the show, Dan Warren. Dan, what's shaking? How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. How are you guys doing? How's my audio?
Your audio's fantastic.
You sound awesome.
Yeah,
all right, I want to start off by saying I do know who George Burns is.
And there you go.
I think I might have been the only one that picked up on Rather's Simpsons reference to the alien overlords with the Home of Space episode. Is that where that came from, Rather?
Of course, yeah, you got it, Dan.
Got it.
Love it, man. I used to watch The Simpsons a lot, but I just would watch reruns and I would laugh at the stuff, but I'm not like a Simpsons fanatic. So that's funny.
They say that the best Simpsons that were ever produced are the ones that you watched when you were 13, and that's just across the board. Whoever you were, and the Simpsons followed me to college, so that was one thing that like me and all my buddies set our clocks to. Is like, we can't schedule a class for 5 o'clock because it's Simpsons time. And then wrestling would come on, and then the night would get away.
Wrestling. The things that I would watch would be reruns of The Kids in the Hall and South Park, and I would watch The Simpsons, but Seinfeld was like Seinfeld and when Jon Stewart took over The Daily Show. Those were like the two things that I sat and had to watch every time they came on. But yeah, those were good times. So Mr. Warren, real quick before Guthrie comes in, I wanted to sort of promote this collaboration that you're going to be doing here really soon, because I got really excited for you, and I wanted to have you come on and just tell everybody what you're working on. When are we going to start seeing sort of the fruits of that labor?
Right. Which ones are you talking about? Because I'm trying to kind of go in a couple of different routes at
Well,
the same time.
you're starting a show with I'm forgetting his name right now, with Ross, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about that, how you guys got hooked up, and again, like because I want to see that, like I want to see that show. And he had some very kind words to say about this show, and I can't wait to have both of you guys come on and sort of break down what we're going to be talking about, what we're going to be doing for that show. But maybe you could give us a little sneak peek taste.
Well, I'm more or less a tag along for that effort. Once again, I'm just kind of riding people's coattails, just like I did with Ben and Joe. But I met Ross through TikTok. So basically I started making my videos and he started watching them. And after a while, he was like, hey, dude, I'm close by. Like he found out where I live because I said it. Like I think I took pictures of like planes flying over my house, and it was like there's my area on the map. So he's like,
that's why you got to be careful about posting stuff like that online, man. People can find you where you're at pretty easily. But it was a good thing.
I replaced my roof since then, so you can't tell which house it is from the satellite images anymore.
There you go.
But we just started talking, and he was like, I know this sounds weird, but would you want to come over to my house and do a podcast? Because you're so close by. You're one of the only people I know that is into the UFO topic that is also close by. So it's not so much that I was qualified, but I was convenient. That's just, I'm always just the convenient guy to interview, I guess.
We lost our host, Lou. But,
yeah.
What?
Oh, here he is.
Yep.
So you lost us out, you Lou.
Yeah, they got kicked out of my own show. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but were you done with your explanation on what?
Oh well, that's how I got to know him. But then,
there's a show though.
Yeah. So he wanted to start to become. Well, what he does on TikTok is he reviews comic books, like the history of them, the stories behind the characters. So he's just always been a comic book guy for a long time, has a lot of background information, and is very knowledgeable about the subject. But I think he's at the point where he's like, I like doing it. It's great, but I'm really interested in the UFO topic. So I want to start to get involved in that community. Well, I've had a relationship with him. He's been lurking on UFO Twitter for a while. Mm-hmm. So he's been kind of an unknown, just like there's so many people that are joining us now, and you don't know if they're going to stick around or if they're going to be in for the long haul or just a flavor of the month type of thing. Right. So we were basically trying to come up with, well, what can we do that's different? And my entire venture into TikTok is, what can I do that's different, that's not already being done? Where I'm more or less running a gap analysis on the UFO investigation. So, hey, here's something that's not being tackled. So that's where TikTok came from. And with me and Ross combining, we're basically looking to say, hey, there needs to be an introductory level type podcast for the UFO community, to bridge the gap between the super knowledgeable folks that are very prominent in UFO Twitter and the people that are just now finding out that there was something that happened in 2004 with a mint. So we're looking to try to bridge that gap and more or less have a show that is catered to that audience and not the super in-depth. But my goal is to have like the first half of it be general population type of topics, followed up with more in-depth stuff that would be what I consider intriguing, that could potentially spark that interest in someone to do the next step and start researching on their own, or go and watch a UCR and see if they find anything interesting there. So just looking to basically be that bridge from no knowledge to all the abundant knowledge that we have that can be incredibly overwhelming if you're new
it's
to
insanely overwhelming. I mean, like we were talking about it the other day, this could be a college course. I think eventually it's going to work its way to that. I think, and Jazz kind of, he didn't poo-poo it, but he was more pragmatic about it. I think 4350 and the Gillibrand Amendment is going to lead us to the direction of, this is going to be a college course. This is going to be something that you can actually spend 4 years of your life learning about, researching, and come away with a degree and actually share some valuable knowledge with people around you. Or, I mean, I don't know how you would I mean, I'm making a job out of this, right? There's ways to do it, but I think the more bigger information that we get from this ASRO office when it is formed, and it looks like the laws are sort of pushing in that direction. I cannot wait to see the blowback of what that office is going to provide us as a community in forms of data, information, videos, pictures, confirmation, not confirmation. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting things that happen with that. But before we get into sort of the nuance of what's happening in the new senators that have come on board, and I know that one in Tennessee, Roy Blunt, correct?
No, he is from Missouri.
Missouri. Who's the Tennessee congressman that signed on to this?
No, none of the Tennessee senators have yet.
Okay, I thought I saw something from you that a senator from Tennessee. We already know Tim Burchett's in, like he's in, but now I thought you had. So good.
Well,
I'm glad I have you here.
This is the difference between the Senate version of the amendment and the House Republicans version that Galeo is pushing forward, which I think is gonna. I'm sorry to say, I think his efforts are for naught at this point because
I agree.
Oh man, I made a video covering the details of his proposal. It was 10 minutes long. I made a video of the Gillibrand, and it was 18 minutes long. So it's so much more in depth.
It's way beefier. It's got a lot more teeth. Well, we'll talk about it in a second. But let's go ahead and bring Guthrie back in. And Dan, please feel free to jump into this conversation at any time you want. But rather, you have some Black Matter discussions and questions. So let's
can I interrupt real quick? And
please,
because I want to take advantage of the cigarette analogy conversation that you guys are having, because this is a question I want to throw at all of you guys. I'm hoping Guthrie's familiar with it, because I'd like to pick his brain on it, especially. But the cherry that represents the human perception of time compared to the others that has the larger cherry. It's hard to understand how that larger cherry relates and the way that we perceive it. So Lou always talks about how we're in the middle of everything. Like we're not the biggest, we're not the smallest. We're the middle of the pack for most part. Well, is there another cigarette that has an even smaller cherry that has a different way to perceive time than we do compared to this other entity with the smaller cherry? Are we moving in slow motion? Are they perceiving time and reality in a different way than we are? And we're just in the middle between these two extremes.
Wow, that's a good question. What do you think?
Well, so you said it's not necessarily intuitive where we are in relation to that kind of cherry, right? I would say you can imagine us as, if you say one line along the length of that cigar would be like one timeline. And so we would be like one point in the surface that is burning. And there would be points in that surface that is irregular, that are sort of further along the cigar than other points that are further behind. And we might be somewhere in the middle. And it kind of goes to the idea that there might be sort of an average universe, or at least in relation to our universe, we may be most likely to have any kind of interaction with universes that are, again, if there was a multiverse, with universes that are similar to ours. So I'm not sure if that answers your question at all, or if that's pertinent to what you wanted.
I was thinking like overly caffeinated bugs and small mammals seem to be perceiving time at a more rapid clip than we do. So I didn't know if there was a tangible.
Would it be like you're imagining an advanced species would look, or from another dimension would look into us, and it would be like they were either rewinding or fast forwarding time and seeing things very differently.
The entities are Adam Sandler.
Right. So like, who were we talking about recently? There was a stream. We're talking about how neat it is to speed up plants, and they really look like these lively snakes fighting with each other and it just takes on a completely different. effect. If you think about a bug maybe that lives for 3 days, and that 3 days is an eternity for that creature, whereas, and similarly, a human that lives 3 days, that's a horrible thought. Sorry to get morbid here, but that's the whole life for that human. And the longer you live, your clip it literally speeds up, because it's all relative in your own individual life. So I don't know why you couldn't just keep extrapolating across the different dimensions, right? Seems plausible.
Well, it doesn't seem like it'd be one or the other. It seems like there'd be a range, like you'd be able to modulate your perception of time and reality based on where you are and the size of your cherry.
Time dilation.
It almost sounds like the cigar analogy is like a box of cigars. You get a box of cigars. Each one of those cigars, even though they're the same label, they burn differently. They do. Like they taste, in some cases, they taste differently, because this cigar was rolled in a part of the field that's just they've got a little more sun than this part. But yeah, what do you think about that, Guthrie?
Well, I think certainly there was actually a paper that was presented in the neuroscience department recently talking about the perception of time in rats. And it turns out that if you train a rat to distinguish between, say, two vibrations, you present two vibrations to the rat's whiskers. One of the vibrations is longer than the other vibration, and you also have another thing that you manipulate, which is the frequency of the vibration. And it turns out that if you have a higher frequency of that vibration on the whiskers, the rat will be biased towards interpreting that vibration as longer in duration than a vibration of the same duration but with a lower frequency. So it gives us a hint about how our brains might be processing time or inferring the passage of time and the rate at which time is perceived to change.
It's a pretty damn good explanation as to why this show feels shorter than, say, another show. It's just a different vibration. You're providing a different vibration than maybe a different show that we do.
So if there's a lot of unfamiliar stuff happening, like when you're a child, and you haven't mapped the world yet, nothing is predictable, children are very impatient compared to an adult, because a minute feels like an hour.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas for an adult, as far as we're concerned, the less is happening, and things are a lot more predictable. And so to us, it feels like, I suppose, time is passing at a faster rate.
No, that's beautiful.
And I think it kind of, there are certain things, if you get into a car crash, time often sort of slows down. There are certain things that can change our perception of time. And yes, my mother has often wondered whether if she steps on some kind of an insect, whether that's over very quickly for the insect, or sorry, Mum, by the way, if I'm throwing you under the bus here for for this, but it's a good question. Is it over very quickly for the animal, as it seems to be for us, or is that actually a drawn out, painful death?
I think your mother and I would get along. I'm haunted by those thoughts all the time with all the bugs here in Texas.
Well, it kind of reminds me of that movie Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, where he's stuck in the cereal bowl and dad is moving at a much slower rate. Dad's moving at a much slower rate than the kid, and he's yelling, "Dad, don't eat me!" And it's much faster at that level that he's
a big dumb giant, right? Almost, if we're thinking of the alien analogy too, right? If
it's true,
different sizes and everything. Or think about also. Earlier, I was thinking, do people know Horton Hears a Who? It was the short that's after when you were talking about experimenting in the microscopic universes. And you're going to hear, we are here, we are here, we are here. So, I mean, I know that Horton Hears a Who is a kids movie, but I remember watching that and thinking about all these things we're thinking about. Yeah. Could there be little tiny, human beings and life forms that are invisible to us, and we're just some dumb giant to them or something?
We were sort of discussing this a little bit on the lab, where it's, if we were a cell in a human body, and what would these other cells that are interacting with our cell look like? And they might look like UFOs. They might look like, dino beavers or whatever. But it's a wild theory. But I know you got something to add in here. What do you got, Rather?
Well, yeah, I'm curious about, what your thoughts on this theory. Let's say that there are multiple worlds and there are different universes potentially interacting with us. Do you think that might explain some UAP or kind of all UAPs? You have the range from craft and alien bodies to the Tic Tacs to dino beavers to, the structured saucer UFOs. You have
to triangles.
Yeah. Do you think there's, one of them fits the evidence of this multi-world universe reaching out more than another, or presumably potentially all of them?
Well, I think I don't know the starters, but I think the sort of the beauty and also the trouble with invoking potentially an infinite number of universes is that basically anything can make sense. So, and that's kind of what I got to at the end of my post, is that, I tried to actually engage with the idea of, okay, if you could see if dark matter was like a gravitational shadow of a multiverse, would that make sense? And it turns out it's quite complicated, sort of trying to nail down the details of something like this, and you start to have to constrain your model and fill in more and more details so that it'll actually work with the specific observations that we see in our universe. And at some point you may find that you're sort of fitting theories to fit facts, or I forget which way around it is, but the wrong way. It's
and that's kind of
twist the
kind of dovetails onto another my question about dark matter. I find that whole concept very interesting of maybe dark matter is these other multiverses kind of leaking into us. The one kind of potential problem I see with that is that, to my knowledge, dark matter is kind of evenly distributed throughout our universe. And I guess, would that mean that, there literally is atoms, different multiverses, which have every different recombination of atoms to kind of suit that? Or what does that kind of tell us about the potential scope of the universes, if that is true, that dark matter is kind of the leakage of these different universes, if that makes sense?
So it rings a bell what you're saying to something that I'd read while writing this blog post, which is that I've read that if you look at a galaxy in our observable universe, you've got a kind of disk, a galactic plane. The galaxy is kind of flat, and that's where all of our observable matter is. But the dark matter, if you're able to sort of map that, is more like a sphere. It doesn't have that same disk-like kind of compression. That's my understanding. And so I kind of thought, well, maybe that's evidence against the idea of having, a parallel universe exerting gravity on our own. But if you had the gravity shadow of a multiverse with every possible galactic plane superimposed on top of our galactic plane, then perhaps you would see more like a sphere of dark matter around our galaxy instead of just one, plane overlaid on top of ours, or, at an angle. But it really depends, you've got this idea called cosmic inflation. And the idea with inflation is that during the Big Bang, you had these tiny irregularities in the distribution of energy in space, in the vacuum of space, and they're called quantum vacuum fluctuations. And the idea with inflation is that these quantum vacuum fluctuations were blown up to enormous size, and that those little irregularities in energy in space essentially seeded the structure of our universe. So where there was a little bit more energy in that vacuum of space, there is now a galaxy. Where there was a little bit less, there is now nothing. And so it would depend, you know, if you can imagine every conceivable, every possible organization of those little fluctuations being blown up into a different universe, which has a different structure, it would depend on the kind of probability distribution of those different configurations of those little quantum vacuum fluctuations. And that would, if there was a, you know, an average configuration of those little quantum vacuum fluctuations, then you might expect there to be an average structure to the universe. If there wasn't an average structure to those little quantum vacuum fluctuations, then it would be much harder to explain why you see any structure in the dark matter at all. You would expect there to just be dark matter everywhere, right? So then you would have to say, okay, well, what if gravity exerting itself from another universe kind of becomes weaker as the universe becomes less and less like us? So, you know, in our 3 dimensions of space, if you are an object that's on the other side of the universe, the gravitational force acting on us is going to be less than if you're right next to us. And in the same way, if you've got this other dimension in which the multiple universes are sort of distributed, and if that other dimension is kind of like a probability space that is essentially expressing how close to our universe in terms of how similar those other universes are to our universe, if you've got that kind of a situation, then you might imagine, well, you know, with a bit of imagination, if gravity decays with 3-dimensional space, maybe it decays with probability space, and maybe we would feel most strongly the gravity from universes which were most similar to ours, and so maybe we would expect there to be structure in the dark matter that we observe in our dark matter maps. But then, you know, it's sort of the more detail you inject into this, the more you've got to kind of battle with other little observations and, you know, make little tweaks along the way. And so you start to appreciate why we really do need, you know, theoretical physicists who can actually do the maths and think with mathematical precision about this stuff. But it is still really cool that there are physicists thinking about these things seriously, and you know, thinking about multiverses seriously. And, you know, Bill Nelson the other day said, what is it he said? Some people are even saying there's a multiverse these days. I don't know if he knows something we don't, but you know, maybe it says something that the administrator of NASA is talking about a multiverse now as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And yeah, I guess I was mistaken. I was thinking, you know, dark matter was prevalent everywhere, but I think you're definitely right about it being spheres of evenly distributed dark matter, which kind of seems like it almost points to back to your theory of maybe there's Earth at every different point along the sun's distance to us that fill in different universes that kind of creates that average, you know, dark matter around our galaxy. Yeah, fascinating.
Dizzying thought. It's been a trip.
Indeed it is, man. No, this has been a hell of a trip, and I can't thank you enough, Guthrie, for being here. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you and sort of getting these concepts out on the table a little bit here and being able to play with them. I think it's a lot of fun. Would you like to hang around for the last half hour of the show?
I might actually leave you guys to it,
yeah,
because I'm in the middle of moving house, and I
do your thing, man.
Yeah, I should pull my weight.
Well, we can't appreciate you enough, and I cannot wait to have you back on this show. Might have to bring you back for when Lou Elizondo's here, because I'd love to see you pick his brain. That could be really cool.
I'd love that, and thank you so much for having me on.
Oh man, it was an absolute
thanks for
pleasure.
being here.
Yeah, thank you so much
it's been
for being
an honor.
here.
Yep.
All right, Guthrie, we'll talk to you very soon. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Ciao. Guthrie Dyce, everybody. That was
mine feels like it's been through an extreme mental workout there. So
it really has. It really has. Like I am flabbergasted at everything he just said. It made sense. Most of it Thanks to your questions, Jane, and your questions rather. I was able to follow along, and I do love that idea of this could be a very good explanation as to, it's a theory. Again, it's a theory, but I think it's a really fun theory, and it rings true to me for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting just kind of have these theories in your head as more evidence comes in, and see where the conversation goes.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into this Gillibrand amendment here real quick, because we got about 10 to 12 minutes here with Dan where we can dig into this a little bit. Let me share my screen with you guys, because this is I think we're going to go to Dean Johnson here, because I feel like he's the guy really reporting on this the best out of anybody. He's laying down what's going on. So he sent this out this morning, and Jazz Shaw had predicted this on our show the other night. He's like, you're going to see bipartisan support, and you're going to see a senator or a congressman come out and say the word extraterrestrial. Those are the things that you're going to hear and see within the next week or two, and you're going to see this signed into law either by the end of this week, sometime next week during the Thanksgiving holiday, or the first week of December at the latest. And so Dean Johnson put out this morning on a tweet, as you heard here first yesterday, we start today with 5 sponsors on the Gillibrand Rubio Heinrich amendment. I love how the name of this amendment is changed, and that now we have 2 more senators who are like, hey, what about me? I want my name on this. I think they see the value in this amendment. But I also think it got me to thinking, this feels a little bit like a strategy as well.
Well, real quick, the 2 of the names on the amendment now are former presidential hopefuls.
Right. That's a very good point. But what I was going to say is it seems very like there's definitely a playbook here, because it's like, well, Rubio, if I had to take a bet who was going to write an amendment like this, I would have put all of my money on Marco Rubio. But I think you have, first of all, a Democrat, which is obviously the majority in the party, and then you had a female write this out and put it on the table. I think that's a really smart move. If it is a move, it's a smart move, because, of course, a person like Marco Rubio, he's going to have baggage. Let's just call it, best way to put it is a little bit of political baggage. There's some people who really don't like Marco Rubio at all. I don't think Gillibrand has that kind of baggage, but she serves on the same committee as Rubio, and so this is bipartisan. So we've got now 2 more senators and I just love that they changed the name of it from Gillibrand Rubio Heinrich Amendment. It's no longer, I'm going to call it the Gillibrand Amendment forever. Sorry, you boys missed it. But the cool thing is that we have 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats now. So it's a bipartisan effort. Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, Senator Martin Heinrich from New Mexico, who's a Democrat, Senator Lindsey Graham, who I'm sure are very familiar with in this country, and then Senator Roy Blunt from Missouri, who's also a Republican. So this is one of the few bipartisan things that is getting talked about and voted on. And I think this is exactly what Jazz said was going to happen. So I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts, Dan, first of all, on that? And then we're going to get, apparently, and we missed this because this might have happened literally as we were starting the show, but it seems like Gillibrand has made a statement on this. So I'm gonna sort of get your thoughts, Dan, while I look through this and see what kind of nuggets we can get out of here. But I'm curious, what were your first thoughts when we got these sponsorships?
Well, I was actually doing the same thing that you're about to do right now, right before I came onto this, because Brian Bender is the man. Not Brian Bender. Yeah, Brian Bender.
Brian Bender, yeah. Politico.
He's the man. Like he has been really hitting home runs with these politicians. So I don't know how he is getting all this firsthand information and access to them. But he's the first reporter to get any comment from Gillibrand since this amendment has been put forth. So, I mean, she makes a very just plain and her case that she's making is very much in alignment with Ruben Gallego. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced his last name. Gallego, sorry.
Gallego, because it's Latino.
And I am not. So that's going to be a struggle for me. Sorry. I lived in Tucson for 2 years, but it didn't stick. I still call it La Canada instead of La Canada. It's a problem. But they're basically in lockstep with their justification for both of their amendments. They're saying, hey, this is stupid that we don't have information on everything that's in our skies. I don't care what the anomalies are. Like, first, we need to figure out what in the world is flying over our military installations and our secure airspaces that we don't know. It could be, she even says it in there, like advanced balloons, advanced drones. It could be a plethora of things. And it's just simple, logical thinking to want to do something to start to catalog all this mundane stuff that could yield some information of extraordinary things. It's basically, you have to have a frame of reference before you can actually start reaching outside and looking for those outliers of what's normal, what's outside of the pattern that we're used to seeing. So that's her one justification. At the bottom of the article, she also states that her other one is to become Cool Mom of the Year this year, which I think she's got a lockdown.
No way she said that.
Yeah, because she is like the first question I got when I think this amendment, or when I first joined one of the intelligence subcommittees, was my sons asked me, tell me about the aliens.
Okay, I got the quote right here.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one of the quotes from Gillibrand. Oh, God, we should end with this quote. Let's go back. There's a couple more quotes in here, and let's just touch on sort of the level-headedness of where she's coming from, right? So a bipartisan proposal to create more expansive military and intelligence program to study UFOs is urgently needed to determine whether unexplained sightings by Navy and Air Force pilots pose a threat or evidence of some sort of other entity, quote. The lead sponsor said Wednesday, quote, and this is Senator Gillibrand, if it is technology possessed by adversaries or any other entity, we need to know. Burying our heads in the sand is neither a strategy nor an acceptable approach. She's 100% right on that. Let's see here.
That's 100% going up against the stigma. Like, we got to remove the stigma to be able to start to collect the evidence and information and data that we all want.
So Gillibrand is behind the amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act that is being debated this week to create an Anomaly Surveillance and Resolution Office. We've talked about this acronym, ASRO, with authority to pursue any resource, capability, asset, or process of the department and the intelligence community to get to the bottom of the sightings of, quote, unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. She said, quote, we have not had oversight into this area for a very long time, Gillibrand said. I can count on one hand the number of hearings I've had in 10 years on this topic. That's pretty insightful right there.
Well, they probably happened in the last 3 years too, right? I would guess.
Right. I would guess too. The number of hearings, that's fairly concerning, given the experience of our service members have had over the last decade.
How long has she been in that position, I wonder, or had access to?
I don't know how long she's been
information.
in office, but I'm
she
sure
said
that's
for a very long time. I wonder what.
Well, at least 10 years, at least a decade.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I wonder if she's implying that there was a period where there was a lot of heightened activity, and it's just been a really long time since
she's been a senator.
Remembers that, or she's thinking of something before her time.
Yeah.
Little nugget.
Well,
she's been a senator since 2009.
Yeah, so more than 10 years.
Her comments are also somewhat echoed by Gallego, because he stated,
got it.
And I'm going to keep trying.
No, you got it. You got it. That was perfect.
But he had a 9-minute interview this weekend on Rising, which is on the hill. Mm-hmm. And he basically said that there are, let me get my thoughts together real quick, that he's got a problem. Man, I'm drawing a blank. I hate when that happens.
That's okay. Don't sweat it, man. There's been a lot of stuff said here in the last week, so it's okay if you don't 100% remember what Gallego said.
Well, it was that the leaks that we've seen recently, he contributes them to a general frustration on the members of our military not being heard by their chain of command, by their elected officials, that they're making statements that they're saying, hey, there's an issue here, and everyone's just saying, hush, be quiet, keep it to yourself, don't jeopardize your career. And so they're not being heard. So there's a sense of frustration within the military industrial complex by the people that are directly impacted by these objects in the sky, and no one's doing anything about them. So they're getting frustrated, and they're saying, well, if you don't do it, I will. And I can think of somebody that we all know that left the Pentagon because he wasn't being heard by his higher ups. And that happened in 2017. And it's been a wild ride since.
Yeah. Well, Gillibrand also kind of echoes that with this quote here. She says, Gillibrand, a member of the Armed Services Intelligence Committee, said she was heavily influenced by the, quote, repeated reports over the last 2 or 3 years of these increased sightings by Navy pilots and Air Force pilots. She believes the fact that the possible explanations are so varied is why a dedicated effort is required. Quote, you have a million questions that must be answered for a million reasons, she said, citing the entire spectrum of the unidentified aerial phenomenon. You're talking about drone technology, you're talking about balloon technology, you're talking about other aerial phenomena, and then you're talking about the unknown. So she's ruling out all of the conventional stuff that Mick West, and Stephen Greenstreet to a point, and even McGowan has said on our show. She's ruling out, she's like, these are part of the problem, but there's also we're talking about the unknown. Regardless of where you fall in the question of the unknown, you have to answer the rest of the questions. That's why this is urgent. That's why having no oversight or accountability up until now, to me, is unacceptable.
Yeah, I would disagree with you, though.
Of course you are. Of course you are, rather.
It sounds to me like she's talking about, we're talking about drones, we're talking about balloons, and then we're talking about unknown. So my reading of that is that they might fit into those two previous categories. It's unknown.
Why is that your reading of that?
Because that's what it says, right? We're talking about drones and balloon, like that. That's the context of what these unknowns are in.
So you're talking about balloon technology, you're talking about other aerial phenomena, and then you're talking about the unknown. So she's putting an other category there, just like the public report. There's the other category, and this is the category that we need answers on. But it's there and that exists.
But it's not clear that they're not drones or balloons.
That's fair, but no, that's not fair. I disagree with you because I think that's what she would have said. No?
I think that she's basically saying, hey, it could be balloons, it could be drones, and we need to be able to know exactly what they are to rule them out. We need to collect data on each and every object that's in the skies so we can readily identify it. And if it's a drone, then we'll be able to quickly recognize it as such. And then we can move on to the unknown. That eliminates all the mundane, leaving us with
the outliers. The fact that there is another category that does not fit drone and balloon, that category is legitimate, like it's there, it's real. That's what I get from that.
Yeah,
it could be drone or balloon, or other.
Yeah.
Right.
If it wasn't for the detailed amendment, like if I didn't know any, if she hadn't proposed the amendment with all of that, the transmedium submerged, all of that information, then I would maybe read it like how Rather is, because it could just be a throwaway. But at least based on all of the detail in the amendment, I think she means unknowns, like literally
drones and
unknowns.
balloons do not have physiological effects. Rather,
that's a great point. And from the reading of the amendment, it sounds like the classified briefing that they got kind of informed their amendment, and they're like, they kind of know what it might be, but we're going to have all these pointed questions to really figure it out. From reading this Politico article, it almost sounds like the classified briefing didn't help them understand anything, and that if we all saw the classified briefing, we'd be in the exact place that we are now, searching for additional questions. And I'm not sure now which one I lean towards. I mean, I think that it's obviously a weird, unknown issue, but do they know more than we do at this point, or not? I don't know.
They have to know more than we do, because they got an unclassified report has a lot more information. So yes,
I mean, right? So there's really two scenarios, right? One is like what Jazz was saying, right, where she was amazed or curious by what she saw, that this could be extraterrestrially is another.
She was briefed on it.
Or she's briefed on it and was annoyed that she had to be briefed on it. And so maybe to Rather's point is like, okay, let's take this seriously so that we can stop hearing about this, which I guess is possible. But I don't know. I'm just leaning more toward, I don't think you would put this much effort forth just out of annoyance, right? Or just out of wanting to bury it. I think this would just bring more money to it, more attention to it in a way. So I lean toward Jazz's theory, but I didn't know her before. I haven't seen like many interviews with her. I haven't talked to her. So it's just these quotes,
this is the first time she's ever talked about it. This is the first time this is the first time she's publicly, there's ever been a quote from her in writing, is this article that we're going over right now. So, I think this is like, I wouldn't be surprised if the Republicans threw her out there and said, "Hey, go for it, Avril. Go put out this, and we got your back, girl." And then if the response to it would have been super negative and a whole bunch of congressmen would have come out and been like, "What are you, crazy? We can't afford this. Get out of here." I don't think you see Rubio and Heinrich's name on this. But she's gotten, I don't think she's lost any followers since hashtag Gillibrand amendment has started trending. Okay, like I'm sure she's been getting contacted with phone calls, emails, tweets saying thank you. Finally, thank you. And so they see that the political advantage of that, and so that's why I think you see all of these senators going, "Oh yeah, I want to be on the bill. Put me on the bill. I'm in for it," and this is going to be a bipartisan thing. And that's why Jazz, it's going to pass, man. Like, this is going to pass. So let's go to a couple of other quotes here. She says, quote, "You have to have the smartest, most informed minds in the world convening on these issues so you know what you're up against. There are always the questions of, is there something else that we simply don't understand that might come extraterrestrially?" So there it is. Jazz called it. Jazz Shaw said that you're going to have a senator use the word extraterrestrial and or the exact same wording that the DNI official, Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines said. Extraterrestrial.
So the term's been used again? Wait, yes. I'm like, my
that's a quote from Avril, though.
No, okay, so that's a quote from Avril, though, right?
Is that a quote from Avril? Oh, you're right. That is you're right.
Okay. I was going to say, if two people use extraterrestrial.
Yeah, no, you're right. That was a quote from that. You're right. I apologize, but
no, you're good.
Yeah, sorry.
She says alien in here.
She does say alien.
Control F alien.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. Okay, so let me read a couple other quotes. Maybe we'll find it. So when you tell people don't report a sighting of something that's odd or out of the norm because people will say you're crazy or you'll lose your credibility as an airman or naval aviator, you're obviously not going to report it if something is wrong with your health. The same response was received from people who were experiencing Havana syndrome, she said, referring to the recent mysterious injuries experienced by diplomats and other personnel. The treatment with which our service members have been subjected is unacceptable. And I'm sure Lou Elizondo, Christopher Mellon, Sean Cahill, Gary Voorhees, Jazz Shaw, loved that quote. Because those are the guys, when we did our big first phone home, the military personnel were the guys who were the angriest. And they really hate being told how to feel about things, especially when they're experiencing them and they're supposed to be paid to properly observe these things. So I love that.
A right to be, yeah, 100%.
She has enlisted several co-sponsors from both parties, including Republicans Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, Roy Blunt, Democrat Martin Heinrich. I don't see opposition to this on any level. That's something also Jazz said. Let's see here. So while she mostly couches her efforts in national security terms, the former presidential candidate also acknowledges that the sci-fi implications of UFOs could quote sci-fi implications of UFOs also compelled her to take action. The first question I got when I got on the intelligence committee was, Mom, tell us about the aliens. I go, I know nothing about it. She recalled her conversations with her two sons. So there's the aliens. There's a senator saying the word aliens. And Jazz called that. He said they're going to use extraterrestrial. They're going to use aliens. Don't be surprised when that happens. And she used it in a personal story, so I don't think it's as impactful as her saying.
I wish she said
these could be aliens. Yeah,
I knew nothing about it then. I wish she said that.
Yeah, that would have been a hell of a quote. I'm getting the coolest mom jersey for sure this year. So like I love that she loves this. I love that she's getting the proper attention that I think she has commanded on this. I mean, she wrote an amazing bill, and I think it's fair to say, we don't know this, it's pure speculation, but I had a feeling that Christopher Mellon had a big hand in that bill.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I know you have a comment on that. I mean, what do you think about, because we've read all of Christopher Mellon's blog posts, and man, a lot of the things he said in his blog posts are pretty much in this bill. But do you agree with that, Dan?
Oh, the name of the office alone is a red flag for it. There's been some communication, or they've been paying attention to what Chris Mellon has been writing, because it's almost exactly the same thing. It's just the words have been swapped around slightly. But I still wish they would have added a T into it, so it could have been Astro instead of Asro. A little bit easier to roll off the tongue. But overall, there's I think I mentioned 4 things. I know Chris C Sharp over at Libertarian Times.
Liberation Times did an article about it with a lot more references than what I was able to find. But I dug into some of it, and there are almost copy paste sections out of Chris Mellon's blog that were incorporated into the amendment. So without a doubt, his fingerprints are on this thing. Yeah. I just don't know if it's active engagement or passive engagement. In what regards do you mean by that?
Well, because Galileo Project, is a few members from that are proposed for the Transmedium office, and Christopher Mellon just joined it.
It's in the bill.
Right. So so there'd be, I mean, I guess that's just how politics work. You work stuff out. But I wonder if there's almost like a conflict of interest, right? Of anybody who would have influenced this, and then they get appointed to some, government job, right? If this is passed, I guess that's just how it works, though. So I don't cover bills and politics. But
I didn't either until about 3 months ago, and then all that changed.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if when I say if he was actively or passively involved with it, did he actually get contacted by their office and say, hey, we want to write this thing. We want to write a robust one. Help us out. Or did they just get some information from stuff that he's done and incorporate it into their bill and say, hey, look, we're plagiarizing you. Hope you don't mind.
If I had to take a guess, I'd say Christopher Mellon was active in contacting them. If I had to take a guess,
which makes me think, okay, well, that the breadcrumbs are there for him saying, well, we need to make this advisory board or committee, and we need to include people from these different groups, and the Galileo project hasn't been around for that long. It's a relatively new entity.
Right.
Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo only joined like a week, 2 weeks ahead of this amendment being pushed forward. And it just so happens that they get 3 seats at the table. NASA gets 3 seats at the table. How does an established organization like NASA get the same amount of influence on this committee as this recently established Galileo project? It seems like there's been some spoon feeding going on.
Well, we have Avi Loeb coming on Friday. So these could be one of the questions that maybe we fire away at them. Like, how long has this been in the works?
And ask him what he thinks about it.
It doesn't feel like it just happened.
Well, and then the Washington Cathedral conversation, how long had that been scheduled for? And the timing of it was interesting because it was right after that, right? If I'm
that one was a moving target. That one started off with Bill Nelson and Avi, but then it got Avril. That was, and then it got Jeff Bezos. So
right.
Snowballed a little bit towards the end in an exciting way.
Rather, what do you got to say with that quirky smile?
I just some amazing times we're living in, and just coming from Chad Shaw that closure has passed on the NDAA. We're moving forward with the Gillibrand amendment intact. I don't totally know what that means, but I think it means that there's no more amending that amendment, and that it's going to be voted with the NDAA. Which
I know it wasn't voted on today. That got pushed, right? The vote on it got pushed, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, today. I could be wrong, but I thought
this is all I know right
bill
here.
in general, it was supposed to be spoken about on the floor, but I believe that got pushed. And maybe it could be because of this, because they wanted to just nail down the verbiage of it and then move with that verbiage intact into the vote. Could be wrong. Maybe Jazz will clarify.
Ryan Sprague was tweeting out. That's the only reason I knew about it. But Bernie Sanders apparently was criticizing the bill, and he did criticize Jeff Bezos' space fund, but I didn't see anything about the Gillibrand amendment in there. So, and I haven't
Bernie's
seen anything.
Have an issue with it because,
but not with the amendment. Not with the amendment. It doesn't appear. At least it looks like it's just broader, like kind of normal politics things. With
I think he was saying we need to get our priorities in order. I think he was more concerned about we got to stop being a warring nation and be focused more on our social situations,
which I can't totally disagree with. But do not. I'm sorry, I'm going to curse here. Don't fuck with this bill. Don't fuck with this bill, Bernie. I like you, but don't touch this bill, or even begin to start putting the name of this bill in your mouth.
But I guess every amendment can be contended with is how it works. Or at least that's what's in the process right now. And so I didn't see anything in the article with Sanders, at least, criticizing that amendment. Just the Jeff Bezos space money, which would be a separate part of the bill. So it seems like, if anything, people might be ignoring that amendment. So hopefully it's
that's what Jazz said. Like the idea of this amendment is, like, if you're going to be the senator that's going to die on this hill, the political spin for you is going to be like, oh, you don't support the military, you don't support the people overseas, like they need equipment, they need stuff to operate. You're gonna fight against this, and so then that political spin is, oh, you're weak on Russia, you're weak on China, you're weak on this, and then that gets to your constituency, and then your constituency, depending on what state you're in and how you're running, they could take that and you could lose your seat if they really want to pick that fight. But I don't think, like Jazz Shaw, no one's gonna die on that hill. He said it, like, and I believe him. I think he's right on the money when he says that.
And I think there's also going to be an increase in attention based on the Russian, I can't remember what the acronym they use for their satellite killer, that they basically destroyed a satellite or ran a test to destroy a satellite.
Right?
And that was 2 days ago, I believe. And it required the International Space Station occupants to go shelter in place, basically. I mean, that's Russia, a bad situation.
Their own.
Russia, man, I'm so sick of Russia's shit. Like they are just like playing with matchsticks, children playing with matchsticks, and they really don't have the capability to do anything to anybody unless it's a country that can't defend itself. That's the only time Russia really shows how powerful it is. Like I'm sick of their shit. I'm just sick of it. They're bullies, but they're not even that tough. That's my biggest beef with them, other than human rights issues and a whole bunch of other stuff. But let's not go there. So, Mr. Warren, thank you so much for coming aboard and providing your thoughts, because I love your TikTok. I love everything that you are bringing to the table. I think you're going to be a wonderful bridge into people who don't know about this topic and want to learn more. I can't wait to see what this channel produces and what you guys put out. I'm super excited, and the door is always open, man. Anytime. Don't ever be afraid to be like, hey, can I come out, hang out today? I will always say yes to you, dude. Seriously. You're such a wonderful voice, and you helped us get a congressman on the Big Phone Home. So I'm forever in your debt, and I can't wait. I think the Big Phone Home 3, when and if it does happen, which it will, I think we're going to get more congressmen. I think we're going to get more senators to join us and have a conversation like Tim Burchett did. Am I pronouncing his name right? I got it right.
Yeah, you got it.
Right. I've been
I want to point out that this isn't just the United States congressmen getting involved. Like, actually was in conversations with Senator Peter. He's Senator Surfer. I can't remember exactly how to pronounce his last name. It's hyphenated, but he prodded the head of their Air Force about the UFO topic during the hearings that they had, the public hearings they had just last week or 2 weeks ago. So I made a TikTok video about that, tagged him in it, and he actually had a conversation with me. And since that conversation that he had with the Air Force lead, he's been in contact with Ross Coulthart, because obviously for obvious reasons they both care about Australia. And then but you're talking about a senator in Australia, right? Yes, he's the senator of one of the senators that represents Tasmania, or Tassie as they call it. And but he's interested in it, and so it's not just the influence that is coming from the UFO topic isn't limited by a border.
Right.
All our friends in the UK, shout out to all of them. There's so many of them that are influential, and now it's spreading from there to Australia. It's spreading all over.
I gotta get. I've really got to get with Ben, and because I've got the permission from Dan Zetterstrom and those guys to also share their letters for Parliament to put on the Big Phone Home website. So that way, the Big Phone Home is, again, it's not just for us here in the US. It's a philosophy and a concept that we want other countries to apply to their forms of government. And I think you're right, man. I think, especially with the trip to Italy, and we've got, the Canadian side of things, especially with Daniel Otis and the work that he's doing up there. It's the conversation is changing in real time. We're literally watching political winds change on this discussion. And for me, it's exciting. I mean, to watch stuff like this, I've been waiting for this my whole life, and I geek out over stuff like this because I think it's important, because in 5 years, we're going to look back at this and go, whoo, man, if it wasn't for that Gillibrand amendment, if it wasn't for these senators and congressmen all over the world actually putting their political careers on the line to talk about something that could easily turn around against you, I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be a really interesting 5 years. But Mr. Warren, thank you so much for being here, man. Honestly, I can't tell you how much I love you. It's always really fun to have you here.
Appreciate that. And real quick, the Gillibrand amendment, maybe that is the straw that breaks the camel's back, and we start to see the other governments around the world fall in line and say, hey, America did it with this Gillibrand amendment.
Why can't we?
Let's set that up. If it's important to them, it should be important to us. So maybe that is the shoe that.
And a lot of people American exceptionalism is that. You know, like this idea of selling like Coca-Cola, like everybody wants Coca-Cola around the world because it's here. You know,
and it's
like
okay to do it because they did it in the US. So now
it truly, like, I don't think people understand the power of American exceptionalism and how influential we are on the rest of the world. Even though I think we've lost a lot of influence with presidents and yada yada. There's a lot of reasons why American exceptionalism isn't as powerful as say it was right after World War II. Or during the 80s, during the Cold War, you know, like when American music was infiltrating Russia, you know, and changing the culture within Russia, and it's just cool stuff. But all right, my dude, we'll see you soon. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Absolute pleasure. All right, you guys. So that's the end of the show. I promised you guys. We're running a little long, but I did promise you guys, because this is we're just going to go back to this real quick. Jean-Francois Chalamage with $139 donation. Thank you so much, my lady. Says, I'm watching live, but I thought I'd take a minute because, you know, the gun to my head. Please don't interrupt for my dumb message. Well, I was going to do that anyway because we love you around here. And says, love y'all. Thanks for what you do. We truly appreciate it. But I wanted to just be as transparent with the people who love this show and the people who absolutely hate the show. And there's a few, there's not a lot, but there are a few. And I just don't understand this concept of not being able to make money doing something you love. Like, it's so un-American. It's so backwards. It seems like for some reason in this community, you have to be struggling or not making any money doing all the research
or not
and the
trust
work.
Somehow that is correlated with trustworthiness.
Right. Like this idea that if you make, and I think it's partly because there have been a lot of charlatans in this field that charge $300 plus for a ticket to a conference that's online, you know, or you know, charging thousands of dollars to go see entities in the desert, and it's just flares dropping out of planes. So I think there is a part of the community that has been ripped off, and they're pissed. And I totally sympathize and understand that part of the community, but that you shouldn't throw the entire, you know, part of this community that's creating content for people to consume under the bus with all of those other people.
You should want it to be successful.
You should want this to work. It doesn't make any sense. Like,
it's not a zero-sum game either, right? Like, you
right.
know, if you're successful, that's going to make the whole UFO topic more successful, and it'll make room for others.
Well, and here's the thing too, is the people that I really love in this community, the people that I genuinely care about, and I see them struggling with this kind of thing where they want this to be their full-time job. I've reached out to all of them. And I said, hey, I can help you. I sort of see the code, the matrix code. And for me, it's very simple. And I'll share the code with you now. Like, the reason why there's no paywall on my show is because I hated paying for paywalls to get stuff early or stuff, you know, that I think the UFO topic is a topic that demands instant transparency. Especially when you're talking about,
I mean, yeah, no shade to other people who do.
No shade. That's no shade to anybody. We have a ton of friends that look, and also that's.
I just haven't really figured out how to spend the time to do the paywall. I'm not against it. I've been wanting to do Patreon or something for a long time.
And I've got the Patreon, and we've got the Discord, and you go to my Patreon.
Actually, might have some membership coming.
Well, please do, Jane. And if you need any pointers, please don't hesitate. I'm always here to help everybody. But like, it's for me, the reason I think that it attracts people to give me $140, you know, is because I don't put stuff behind paywalls. I give you everything for free, everything. Okay. And I've started, this channel was monetized right after the big phone home. So that was April. So in March is when this channel hit 1,000 subs, and then had the privilege of being monetized. Like you had to have 4,000 hours of watch time, which at the time seemed like, wow, that's so high. Why is it so high? And then we see the growth of the channel, and we hit I mean, I did the math the other day. You're not going to believe this. And I just found this absolutely mind blowing. This show has close to 125 or 130,000 hours of watch time, which is, when you do the math, that's 16 years.
That's amazing.
16 years worth of
There's
watch
some time dilation for
that is insane. Insane that people are watching my show that much, right? And then I think of that 4,000 hour number. I'm like, oh, okay, that's why they make it 4,000 hours, because it's not, but they want you to work for it. They want you to make sure that this is what you're trying to do, and that you're committed to it. And that's part of their formula, I guess, right? To make sure that you're a YouTuber, and this is what, because they got to make money too. But I wanted to share this with you guys because, again, I'm here to be 100% transparent with you. I'm going to share right from my YouTube analytics how much I've made off this channel since March. Okay. So there's a number right there. It's $12,793 since March. Okay. Now, as a waiter, I made $60,000 a year in the best restaurant that I've ever worked in out here in Los Angeles. I hated the job. Absolutely hated the job. This provides me something that I love to talk about, that I love to do, and I do it with my friends. And in 5 years, when this $12,000 number is 4 or 5 times bigger, which I think eventually it's gonna get there. The statistics are telling me that. Guess who starts getting paid too? Jane and Rather and Michael and all of the people that have helped me build this tiny Mesopotamian sort of empire that I'm slowly building on with the help of all of my friends. And even when you add my Patreon on this, and I'm rounding up, you guys, okay, you add my Patreon support, which is about $500 a month I get from Patreon. But that hasn't been 500. I've had to build to that, right? But let's just say it's been 500 a month for the last 6 months. That's $3,000 more dollars on this. So $15,000. So that averages out to $658 $658 a week, roughly. Okay. But when you divide that $658 into the amount of hours that I spend booking, doing research, even though people think for some reason I don't do research. I don't know what makes you think that about this show. I have no clue. I think it's because we had to fill 5 days a week. So there have been some guests, I guess, people don't like or find shady, but once those shady elements of,
because you might disagree with some people on some issues, which obviously is you not researching it.
Correct. Right. That's me not researching it. Right. Because I don't believe the Wilson Davis documents are hardcore proof of anything. It's just a fun story. All of a sudden, I'm not a researcher. That's fine. I've never called myself a researcher. I've never claimed to be a researcher on this channel. I've always said I'm just a dumb actor who lives in Los Angeles, who loves talking about UFOs, and I spend my day listening to conversations like this that we have on the channel. The only difference is I've figured out a way to make this my life and my job. And I'm really proud of that. And 12,000, even if you double this over a year, that's $24,000 a year I'm making. That's terrible. Yeah, that's not a career.
Almost making minimum wage, or
almost.
Really,
well,
almost.
When you
not
actually,
really almost.
If you, and this is being, again, I'm being gracious with these numbers. If you say I put 40 hours a week into this show, and it's a lot more than 40 hours a week, it works out to, I believe, around $13 an hour, which is $2 less than a national minimum wage.
And then there's taxes and health insurance, guys, and
so much other things. Like I'm basically at the poverty line. I'm at the poverty line. I don't think I'm going to be at the poverty line in 5 years. That's the goal, right? And
you certainly deserve more, but you're very grateful for what you do. It's you're a benefit for the community.
I'll never say I deserve it, right? But I know the reason why people do it. We asked them at the top of the show, but it's not like we're sitting here for 2 hours going, okay, guys, send in your super chats. Okay, guys, send in your super chats. People do it at their own accord. They do it because they love the show. I'm sorry if you're boring. I'm sorry. Your boring ass show isn't as successful as this one. If you want some
probably
help,
where a lot of the comments.
This is definitely
not actual.
Well, there's no doubt. It's just gel. It's jelly. People are jelly. They have a peanut butter, and they ain't got no jelly for their sandwich. So this is their jelly for the sandwich, and it makes them sleep better at night or whatever it is. I don't know what the problem is. I'm not going to stop how we do this show. I'm going to provide it for free for as long as I humanly can. And if we get a big sponsor for the show, which I think eventually that's going to happen, everybody's getting taken care of. Everybody's going to be able to quit their job, and everyone who helps me with this show is going to come along for the ride. And the only reason why I'm not splitting $12,793 between my co-hosts is because that's nothing. I live in Los Angeles. I'm at the poverty line, but this is only year one. So, I've got no shame, and this is the way I explained it on our friend's show, the UFO Garage, because this is something that they had reservations to do. There's no shame in asking your fans that you provide free content for support. If you go to a restaurant and you have an amazing meal, an amazing experience by a waiter that walked you through the menu, or maybe even picked out your food for you, you're not going to tip them?
Mm-hmm.
It's absurd. It's absurd.
Yeah, I mean, the love goes both ways too. I mean, I think it's amazing that you could amass even that through just pretty much putting out your hat and asking for donations. It's an amazing community that obviously really supports what we're doing, which is motivation enough for me.
Right. And I mean, Jazz Shaw, $25 donation, says this show is pure evil. And that's hilarious, and look, man, it's people like Jazz Shaw, and I'm not even going to throw my merch in there because honestly, I've made practically nothing off the merch. So the merch is not profitable whatotherwise unless you're selling millions of t-shirts. And honestly, it's fun. I love having merch. I love when Jazz shows up to the show with his mug, and Rather's got his mug and their t-shirts. It makes the sticker here available on the merch store. I love that stuff. But eventually one day we're going to take the manufacturing of these things out of the hands of corporate overlords and put it into our hands where we got a little more control, where we could keep more of the profit margin, because I want to pay people, because that's America, because that's how the free market works, you assholes. I'm sorry, you're an asshole. Okay. All the people I've heard this in the restaurant business. I've heard this in the professional sports business, and I've heard this in the UFO community, that there's no money. There's no money in the UFO community. There's no money in it. It's not that there's no money in it. You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. Period. End of story. Full stop. You're either boring, or you're not doing it at a consistent level, or the way you do it just for whatever reason isn't resonating with people. That's not my fault. That's not my problem. But if you want some help, my door's always open. Always will be open to anybody who wants help with this part of the discussion. And I am so tired of walking on eggshells because people decide to throw me $10 or $500 during the big phone home. We had a donation at the end of the 3 days. Do you know how many hours I put for someone to get My fee would have been around $15,000 just to organize the Big Phone Home. How many hours it took to organize 3 8-hour live streams of free guests. It was a free UFO conference. I didn't charge anybody a dime. Okay. I'm not in a position to take my money and give it to charities. You know, I'm not there yet. We'll get there, but it's not yet. And that's kind of what I just wanted to touch on. You know, I wanted to address these jelly little monkeys out there and show you guys how much money I make. Okay. And I will always be this honest with my audience. If they want to know how much money I'm making from this, I will always, without a doubt, send anybody any figure they want to know. I've got no problems telling you guys how much money I'm making off of this. And I'm not ashamed to make money off this. And you're not going to shame me for doing it. You're just not. I'm sorry that you quit your full-time job and you gave up your pension to pursue this full-time and failed at it and then had to go back to your 9-to-5 job. That's not my fault. It's not my fault. And you pointing out the fact that I'm being successful at this just shows who you really are. It really shows how you feel about the show. You've got no respect for us, even though we've shown you nothing but the utmost respect. We've laid the door open for anybody who has respect for this show to come on this show and be part of it anytime they want. That's kill them with kindness is the motto of the show. Sometimes I fail at that because I get pushed to a point where it's like, I've got to defend myself. I've got to defend my team, and I got to defend the philosophies of what we do on this show. And it's so funny. I don't even know why I'm doing this because it's really just one.
It's really nobody's business either. This isn't something like you have to do at all.
I don't have to do this.
I mean,
no, I don't have to tell you guys how much I make. You know,
I think that should say a lot too.
I think it does too. But of course, we're gonna get people who don't agree, who are gonna talk. I've seen
the same criticisms about getting money for events or appearances, and I think people need to understand that even for like a TV show appearance, there's a lot of time that is put into researching, preparing, travel, other life things that you might have to take, a whole day away from. And to say that time of that researcher is not worthy of anything, should just be $0, is so disrespectful to that person. I mean, I will say, I'm very grateful for my career. I've had a full-time marketing career, and I'm very grateful for. I have a husband, I have a kiddo, I have animals. And so I hope that the time that I spent, on this is worth more than, $0, because basically, and I've dedicated everything
all of your free
to
time.
it. And I do think it's worth money,
it is worth
and
money.
And I'm not ashamed to say I think it's worth something. And I do appreciate super chat as well. That was not a feature in YouTube for a while. It was just the basic ads, and that's just, I don't know if Luis can be transparent about that, but those are you don't make really anything from that. So super chat's like a really great way, and also YouTube still gets a cut of that, guys. So it's a great way to just directly support all the work.
No, and I mean, like, if you sat here and asked my girlfriend how much time I put into this, it's insane. And then on top of that,
it's already paid for itself, guys.
It's already paid for itself. But then on top of that, I'm a full-time actor. I've got a 4-page script I got to memorize and put on tape for tomorrow. It's due Friday, but I can't do it Friday because guess what? I'm going on Ryan Sprague's show at 10 o'clock in the morning. That's when my audition is due. So I've actually got to get the audition done a full day early. And if you think that planning this show doesn't affect how many auditions I book, you're wrong. I'm losing money. I'm not making money on this. Not yet. I will. We're getting there.
But you're building something very special.
Absolutely.
No denying that.
There's no denying that. And it's not only my co-hosts that make this special, but it's all of you who watch the show and share the show and like the show and put your hard-earned cash that you slave for. God knows that I can't imagine what some of your jobs are out there, and you guys put $100 toward this show is mind-blowing to me. But at the same time, I can also understand, because I've done that with other shows that I really love and respect, and I see the work. I see what they're doing. I see the passion, and I don't mind giving 10, 15,
well,
20
think how many years we're in. I mean, most industries, just it's a given that you get paid for whatever influencing your content. And most researchers that you're a fan of, right, we've been at this field is, I guess it's newer, right? So we've been putting in over the years, so paid our dues. That makes sense. So yeah, retroactive.
Yeah, I mean, look,
all the lead up to Big Phone Home. And
at 40 years old, 41 now, I'm 41 years old, and I've never been happier in my life, and I'm making a quarter of the money I was making before.
Yeah, money and happiness are not as correlated as many think.
I could honestly, and this is where we'll end, because we've already gone half hour of the show, and thank you guys for hanging around for this rant here. But
I love it. It's great.
Like being a 36-year-old man and having your boss call you over like this, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Okay. And ever since then, all I've been doing is just brainstorming. How can I get out of this disgusting, terrible industry that I loathe, that has no appreciation for the passion and the, like, I was an awesome waiter. Like, honestly, like if you ever had me as a waiter at a restaurant, I promise you I would have been one of your favorite waiters.
That's how you got Lou Elizondo, right?
That's how I got Lou Elizondo on the show. You're absolutely right, because I was his waiter, right? And so, I had a lot of passion for that, but the people who employed me didn't have passion for my passion. And I was tired of being out of control. And I said to myself, I'm going to start a UAP channel after I met Lou. And I'm going to give myself 5 years to see if I can make this a viable source of income to even partially support the madness that I'm trying to accomplish out here as an actor in Los Angeles. And it looks like this is going to be my path. I don't think, fingers crossed, but I don't think I'm going to get the series regular on a network show. I don't think I'm going to be the star of a movie. I think those days are gone. I think they're gone. And, but I've had a lot of successful moments in that industry. I've worked with the best of the best. Just go look at the resume, as Kurt Joy Mungle shared and found. It's funny, like nobody else had found my IMDb except for him. But I've worked my ass off for this, and every failure, every moment of doubt, every success has been leading up to this, meeting Jane, meeting Rather, reading Michael, having Daniel Miller do a show with us. All of this stuff is happening because this is where I'm supposed to be. I can't speak for anybody else. And I'm sure as the years go on, things will change on the show. People will come and go. Things will happen. But right now, I've never ever been happier in my life with my job. And this is not a job. This is now a career. $24,000 a year career. If the statistics keep going where they're going, it's basically poverty line. But man, I've got goals, I've got dreams, and I'm so happy that all of you guys are here for the ride. I'm so happy that all of you guys are here to support and do all of the things that you guys want to hear, see, and talk about. And this is I'm an open book for you guys. I am as transparent as I possibly can be, not only with my personal life, but now my financial life. Okay. And if you don't like this show, there are a million other shows you can you could go watch. But if you don't like this show and for some reason you watch every show, stick around. Stick around because you drive the statistics, you make sure the show gets better. So keep hate watching. I truly appreciate it. And I'm gonna not laugh all the way to the bank because this ain't a laugh all the way to the bank moment, but I'm not gonna have any shame in being American. I'm not gonna do it. So if that's what you're looking for me, you could go kick rocks. So with that said, I love you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of these super chats that you guys are putting in here. Paisley, love and respect, Spaghetti Lee. Thank you so much. Admiration, don't change a thing. G West with a $10 donation. Your show is awesome. I love having it on every day while I'm working. Makes the end of my day much better. Love you all. By the way, you guys, thank you. I mean, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Every time something like this happens, you guys come through with these super chats like absolute maniacs and beasts that you are. And it just goes to show that we're doing the right thing. We're doing the right thing, and screw them haters. So Jane, what do you got going on this week? Anything? I know you got an interview coming up with
Jeff Red, and
Jeff Red.
Met him on here in UCR, and I just wanted to keep talking to him about Skinny Bob. So we're gonna go over the footage, just one-on-one. So go over some questions I had, speed things up, slow stuff down, try to break it down. So that's tomorrow night.
Right on. What time does that come on?
Yeah. So that's 7 Central, 5 Pacific.
5 Pacific.
Yeah,
awesome.
Sorry, Texas time here.
Rather, you also have a new video out. Would you like? I mean, we kind of went over it in the beginning of the show, but please tell everybody where they can find your show.
If you found the first half of today's show interesting, you should go check out my video on psychic abilities in the fourth dimension. It's pretty interesting, and I'm going to try to find another rabbit hole to go jump down next.
Time traveling in the brain, huh?
Right on. And by the way, guys, everybody's links who's on this show, everybody's who contributes to the show, all of their links are in the description below. Please go and support Rather. Rather has a Patreon. Go and support Jane. Jane you have a Patreon, right?
I'll have a Patreon eventually.
Well, we got to get your Patreon.
I'm working on some membership, but
get your Patreon.
We got the live stream tomorrow.
Yeah, I actually don't have a Patreon either.
Yeah.
I'm lucky enough to be supported on my full-time job that I don't spend enough time at. But
well, either way, go subscribe to their channels. Go
I'm not good at asking for money. I'll just say that.
Well, see, that's the thing.
Give it all to Lou.
Don't give it all to me, you guys. Go support them as much as you can. You should have it, okay? Michael Mataluni, I know for sure, has a Patreon that you guys can support. So go show your love for those accounts. Go show your love for that UFO podcast. Go show your love for Ryan Sprague and what he's doing over there. These are the guys that helped me get to where I'm at. These are the inspirations that helped me to get here. And I got no issue telling you guys to please go spend that hard-earned cash on the people that you love, and don't be ashamed to give it to them, and don't ever be ashamed to ask for it. You're essentially a waiter. You're providing a service, you're providing content, and then you're holding out your hat and you're saying, tip please. That's customary. Okay. If I'm walking down the street and I see a street performer, if I keep walking, I'm not going to tip them. But if I sit there and I watch the show, you bet your ass that there's going to be some cash coming out of my pocket and going into that hat. So that's what this show is. It's a street performance show. It's a public access channel. We are supported by viewers like you. And that's, with the measly 12, I don't want to say measly because that's very disrespectful, with the wonderful $13,000 rounding up that this show's made in 6 months, it helps me do this show every day for you guys. And I love doing it, and I love being here, and I love sharing the stage with my friends, my new friends that I've never actually met in real life.
I know.
I can't wait for that to happen. And we've got some things planned for next year. I'm already starting to get the gears turning on a live show where all of our friends are on a stage doing the show and live streaming it at the same time. So we're gonna have a studio audience.
Good thing it's not right now.
Yeah, good thing it's not right now. But we're going to get everyone we can who's part of this show. If we can get them there, we're going to try and get them there. And it's going to be, next year's going to be what are you doing, Jane? Look, she's got the power now. We're going to do everything in our power next year to make sure that this is a fun place to come hang out for 2 hours.
I'm dying, guys.
Dying. All right. So Jane, I'm going to get you out of here. My lady, thank you so much for being here. We love you to death. Again, go support UFO Jane. She's going to be on tomorrow at 5:00 Central.
5 Pacific, 7 Central.
Okay. All right. We love you, girl. We'll see you. Don't forget tomorrow on the Singularity Lab, Frank Milburn is going to be on the show. So you want to sort of tune in for that, sort of get the similar discussion of kind of what we were talking about today, maybe dive deeper into the future humans aspect of this phenomenon, which is really fun to think about. You got anything else before we get out of here?
Yeah, nothing for me. Fun show.
Well, I love you. I appreciate you being here. Want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all the tunes you hear on the show. Want to thank all of you guys out there, all of you, every single one of you, the ones who donate, the ones who don't, the ones who want to, the ones who share the show, the ones who like the show, the ones who subscribe. We're almost to 5K, guys. Help us get to 5K. I can't appreciate you enough. Honestly, I do this for you. I also do this for me. And I'm not ashamed to say that. I also do this for me. So before you get out of here, if you want to catch a show on the podcast, we're available on Spotify, iTunes, and wherever you find your fine podcasts. Please do us a favor, rate and review. Goes a long way to making sure the show grows. Like, share, subscribe. I've said that already. Ring the bell just in case show times change. Occasionally that does happen. We've got everybody's links down below. On Friday, we've got Avi Loeb and Peter Robbins. That is going to be a really fun conversation, bringing the best of the woo with the best that science and Harvard have to offer.
Worlds collide.
Let's see what happens. Let's see if we can get Avi to say, yeah, Cuvier drive. All right, it's theoretically possible. Let's talk about it. But let's see. We'll see what happens. But I'm very interested as far as, Galileo and the Gillibrand Amendment. What happened there? But hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it. So with all of that, you guys, thank you so much for coming aboard, getting weird with us here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP, UFO, emerging tech, and future tech. Science. Damn it.
Almost.
I'm
so
almost. Look, yeah. Anyway, I love all of you, man. We'll see you guys soon. Until next time, stay safe out there. Peace.
I'm going to tell y'all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.